Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello, hello. All right, it's a little bit more of a chaotic start today because this weekend we took in a foster kitten. So, hello, we have more chaos in our home. She is super cute and super sweet and super snuggly. But everyone is adjusting at various levels. So she is the sweetest and most confident, friendly, purry little kitten. Indy sometimes is fine. Sometimes she decides to bark at her. Holmes is now in a place where he's able to play next to her and they're not like hissing so long as she doesn't pounce on him. So progress. So anyway, I apologize for the late start. Yeah, this was a development over the weekend that we were not at all anticipating. But it has gotten Indy, no. Up. Hey, up. Yeah, that's right. So I apologize because I'm probably going to need to do a bit of that from time to time, seeing as she's in here. So so we'll see. We'll see how everything goes. So all right. Well, Cherry C. Mills, thanks so much for the member chat. Member for 11 months. Thank you so much for being a member for almost a year. Oh, beautiful fur baby. She is absolutely beautiful. And just like like I said, it's like the sweetest. She just like very quickly worked her way into our souls when we actually I have the whole background on Instagram if you guys want to go and check it out. I won't go into all of it here, but go to the Instagram page and I put it up there. Draco Amy name. So so we've been tossing names around because we've got to call her something, and I don't know if we've fully settled in on it. Like we've because we initially met her. Okay, Indy, no, go up. Because we initially met her on Veterans Day, we've like been thinking of like veterans slash like military kind of names. Like we were initially focusing on like World War II. So we're like, oh, maybe Ike, maybe Patton, because she's like that courageous and confident. As you can see, she's not running away from Indy, which is different from many other cats that we've seen. But I think what we've settled on right now actually is Maverick. I really like that. So I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see if it sticks. Hey, up. Good girl. Okay. Anyway. Oh, hey, sweetie. Hi. So yeah, so she is absolutely adorable. Debbie Faison Cook, thanks so much for being a member for 12 months. You made taco. I love you and your community so much. Thanks. Thank you. It's it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Having this many wonderful people in our community, yourself included. So yeah. Anyway. Okay, so has one. She's a foster though, right? How are you going to give her away? She's so adorable. I know. That's the thing is, we've already got 2 cats and 1 dog, and at some point we are going to have to leave where we are, and we're gonna have to fly back to the States at some point. May not be at the end of this tour, we might go someplace overseas else from here. But at some point we will. We're definitely gonna have to fly across some ocean to get home at some point. And we can only take one small animal per person in the cabin, so we would have to have at least one cat in like under in underneath, like in the with all the luggage and everything, along with Indy. So it's just, I feel like dogs are better equipped to handle that than cats. I don't know. Anyway, so if there is a family that we can place her with, that is a more ideal kind of situation, that's what we would much rather do. Okay, Indy, up, 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 up. Don't make me ban you. People love to see you. Okay, and we'll get started in a minute. Okay. Hey. You're fine. Okay. Anyway, so Draco, he'll volunteer to travel with you to keep the kitty. Well, thank you. But then there's also like, at some point, we've got to figure out what kind of housing we're going to have later on. Anyway, so there's all kinds of questions about all of this. So our preference is to find a loving, no, Indy, up. Is to find a loving family for her. That's like, a more ideal situation. But anyway, she is, I mean, she's spent 2 nights with us so far, and both nights she's crawled into our bed at some point and just like in between us and like cuddled up and purred super loud and everything. She's just absolutely adorable. Okay, let's get on to today's testimony. So we have more Erik Menendez today. This is part 6 now, I think. Yes, part 6 of the Erik Menendez testimony. The first like 5.5 minutes are all in the dark. The audio is clear, but the picture is totally black for some reason. That'll go away after 5.5 minutes. So just letting you guys know in advance. Then there's going to be like 45, 46 minutes in, there's going to be an end of the joint testimony. So right now everything is in front of both juries. Then from then for another like 45 or 50 minutes, there's going to be testimony just in front of Erik's jury. Indy, nope. Up. Nope. I love how she's just sitting tight here, though. You guys can't really see her because she's just off camera, but she's just sitting tight, even with Indy like coming up and being all intimidating. See, you're just such a confident kitty. Okay, so anyway, so then we're gonna get into some cross-examination today. So we're gonna see the beginning of Indy. No, up. Hey, Indy, up. Nope. So we're gonna see the beginning of the cross-examination. So be prepared for all of that. So yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get into it, shall we? Okay. Here we go. So yeah, reminder, first like 5.5 minutes, it's like this.
Thank you. Mr. Menendez, we were talking about that time when you were in Dr. Oziel's office on October 31st, 1989, after he had called your brother Lyle to come over. Okay?
Yes.
Now, you told us yesterday that Dr. Oziel asked you why this had happened. Is that right?
Yes.
And you told him you didn't know why?
Yes.
Did he then ask you any other questions about how it came about or what got it started or anything like that?
Yes, he asked.
Oh, why? Why is this happening?
And what did you tell him in response to that?
I told him that week
Okay.
that there were conversations between Lyle and I.
And what were you specifically, well, ask you this, were you telling him the truth of what was said in those conversations between yourself and your brother?
No, I was telling him part of the conversation, part not. The part that I didn't want to tell him, I didn't tell him.
And what part of the conversations that you had had with your brother, what subjects did you tell him about?
Just about my mother and my father and what the family was like.
And with respect to the actual...
This is annoying. It should all be loaded up.
Ones I was thinking of when I was talking to him.
Okay. My first question, though, is were there conversations, real, truthful conversations between you and Lyle on Tuesday and on Friday when you were driving to San Diego about your family?
Yes.
Okay. And was it parts of those conversations that you were telling Dr. Oziel?
Sustain.
Sorry, guys. For some reason,
Concerning your parents?
For some reason, like I went through all this earlier to clear through ads and all that kind of stuff. So it should have loaded. I don't know why it's doing this. I apologize.
About how different things were and how strange and scary things were inside the family because of all the chaos.
And were you tying that in any way to your parents' personalities or how they had treated you or anything like that?
Yes. Sustain. That's restricted.
So more loading time. Hang on. Oh, geez. Come on, man. Well, internet is going to internet, right? Come on. I don't want to reload the page, though, because then I'll have to go through all the ads again. Also, something that just happened just off camera is Holmes jumped onto the desk, like right in between my computer and one of the screens. And so that he was basically face to face with the kitten. And I don't think he like thought that she was going to be there, and so he like jumped up and then immediately started staring at her.
When and why, what we were thinking.
Hang on, I'll let it load for a minute, I guess. So he just like immediately started staring at her and then like sort of slowly slinked away. It's so funny. Oh man, it's like I feel like I'm living in Animal Planet right now.
Thinking about when the family no longer seemed to be a family. We talked about the affairs that Dad had and the effects that it had on Mom and how Mom changed.
Okay. So do you recall telling Dr. Oziel some part or parts from that conversation?
Yes, I did.
Now, with respect to that week before your parents were killed, did you do you believe you said anything to Dr. Oziel about what kind of emotional condition you were in that week?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I told him that I was a mess and that I was falling apart. I probably did.
Okay.
At what time were you referring to when in the session?
Well, at any time during the session of October 31st, did you tell him, well, strike that. You said you told him that after he asked you, you told him that there were conversations that week.
Yes.
Okay. So.
Jesus, come on. So yeah, just a reminder for new people coming in, the screen is black for the first 5.5. So it should be another minute of testimony that the screen will be black. I don't know why it keeps doing this with loading time.
After you told Dr. Oziel something about these conversations you had had with your brother, did he start talking to you?
Yes.
And can you characterize for us what kind of talk was he doing?
The talk that he did in that session, he would just tell me what he was thinking and tell me why he was thinking that and tell me, in essence, what I was thinking, because I wasn't telling him what I was thinking. I was saying, I don't know. At this point, I was more thinking about Lyle, and so I wasn't talking very much. And
Okay, now we have.
So he was saying that I didn't really understand, and that was one of his bigger things.
What was one of his big things?
That I didn't understand, and that I didn't really know, and that it was too confusing, and it was too much, and I was in such a state that I didn't really understand why this happened or what. So he was telling me from what he knew about my parents, from what he knew, what he thought was going on.
Okay. When he says he told you what you were thinking when? While you're in his office or some other time?
No, that last week.
Was he right?
No.
Did you tell him he wasn't right?
No, I really wasn't concerned about that at the moment.
Well, did you intend to tell him what had really happened?
No. I hadn't intended to tell him anything. I realized that I shouldn't have when I was there with him.
All right. Now, do you recall your brother arrived?
Yes.
Now, you heard your brother testify to what the interaction was between himself and Dr. Oziel after he erupted. Did you not?
Yes.
Do you have a memory any different than your brother's on that point?
Andy being a butthead.
No, it was basically that.
And did you ever hear your brother threaten Dr. Oziel?
No, he didn't threaten Dr. Oziel. He just was pretty nervous in the session. Lyle, he was angry and he was nervous and he just didn't want to be there.
And did Dr. Oziel try to get Lyle to talk about the killing of your parents?
Yes.
And did Lyle do that?
No, Lyle told him many times, I don't want to be here. I don't want to know what Erik said. I just want to talk to Erik. That's what he was saying.
Now, how did you react to your brother being upset and angry?
I was reacting to different things. I was reacting to Dr. Oziel saying, I think I'm being threatened, or you're acting menacing toward me, or something like that he was saying. And Lyle just saying, I can't believe that you went to Dr. Oziel and not me. And I just was feeling really guilty about doing that, and about the whole situation and how I really screwed up by even going to Dr. Oziel. And so I just ran out of the room crying.
So you were upset?
Yes.
And when you ran out of the room crying, was that the last participation you had in any kind of conversations with Dr. Oziel that night?
Yes.
And at the point up until
Sorry, she paused things, I think.
to the point where you had run out of the room, from the time that Dr. Oziel asked you, what happened with respect to killing your parents, until that point when you ran out of the room, did he ever get back to the fact that you wanted to kill yourself and were depressed?
No, I tried to at one point, but he wanted to know the details of what happened, and he wasn't concerned about that other stuff.
And when you left the room, were you feeling better than when you had first?
I was feeling really miserable. I was feeling like I had just made things a whole lot worse, and regretting that I had gone there, and just because for different reasons.
Okay. Now, after this session, did you have a conversation with your brother?
Yes.
And what was the basic subject matter of that conversation with your brother?
What I had told Dr. Oziel and what we were going to do about going back to see Dr. Oziel, if we were or we weren't, if we were, what we were going to do.
Had you told Dr. Oziel before you left the street? Had you told Dr. Oziel out of the street that you would be coming back?
Yes.
Do you remember whether or not you actually made an arrangement for a particular date to come back?
I think we did. I thought that we had arranged to go back on the Thursday. It was the day that he had off or something like that. But I'm not sure if we had arranged the exact time.
And what was it that you and your brother decided in that conversation about whether you should go back to see Dr. Oziel, and what, if anything, you should talk about?
Well, a lot of things were talked back and forth between Lyle and I. We eventually decided to we had to go back and see him because Lyle and I both felt that he very well could go to the police and or that we might get arrested that night or the next day. We didn't know, so we figured we'd go back and see him.
And what was your resolve about what you were going to talk to him about?
Just about what was inside the family, since I was really feeling terrible, and I really was feeling very guilty about that I had done this to Lyle, and so Lyle wanted me to, if we were going to go back, to at least be able to talk about some of the things I was feeling inside the family. So we decided that we could do that and sort of avoid the other subject.
Well, were you going to avoid it, or was there any decision made about other subjects, such as your molestation? Or
No. We were not going to talk about that. Definitely not going to talk about that.
And what were the reasons why you resolved not to talk about that?
Partly because I did not want to talk about that, and I was not going to talk about that, and Lyle was pretty adamant about it as well. And I brought up to the fact to Lyle that, I'm sorry that I created such a mess that Dr. Oziel now is afraid that I told him maybe I should have told him and the truth, and I didn't know, and Lyle was really reassuring that I did fine, I did the right thing, not telling him, and that it definitely shouldn't. And so I felt strong about that.
Let me ask you this. You've testified you felt guilty about killing your parents.
Yes.
Okay. What did you think of your parents at that point?
I didn't hear the
What
question.
did you think of your parents at that point by October 31st?
I thought they were these great people that I had killed, and I didn't understand now very much.
And did you have any feelings about talking about them in a negative way?
I didn't want to talk about them in a negative way. I loved them more than I had ever loved them in my life at that point, because of how sad I felt it. And I just wanted to talk about the good things, even though it made me feel worse.
Excuse me?
I said, even though it made me feel worse, I just needed to.
Now, you heard Dr. Oziel testify about all these negative things about domination and control, and about your father that he says was said in both sessions.
Yes.
Who was saying those things?
Dr. Oziel.
Now, some of those things were true, weren't they? I mean, your father was like that. Yeah,
and that's what Dr. Oziel's understanding was, that my dad was this very controlling, he used the word dominating or domineering a lot. That's from his context with my dad. That's what he thought my dad was, and so that's.
And when he said those things, did you agree with him that is what your dad was?
Yes.
Now, in your mind, was that everything your dad was, or was he also other things?
Actually, overall.
My dad was.
Again, like these objections, I think I think Kuriyama's most successful objection against Leslie is leading, because she is in fact leading Erik quite a bit here. But you can't get too trigger happy on your objections.
It was a whole lot of different things.
Dr. Oziel testified that you discussed with him writing this book about your father, this very favorable book.
Yes, I told him that I wanted to write a book talking about how great he was.
So 1 second, let me answer some. There's a couple questions here. Tish, I know this was already answered in the chat, but I figured I would answer it just in case other people had the same question. Which brother also has a male attorney? Is it Lyle's two attorneys we see in the background? Does Erik also have two attorneys? They both have two attorneys. Lyle is the one with one male attorney. Erik has two female attorneys. So yeah, that should answer that. So 5:15:18, almost spelled lethal bites. That's funny. Can you just walk away from the courtroom? Like, can I, as a witness, just say, no, I'm not doing it and leave? So there are times when a witness is testifying because they're volunteering to testify. We saw that in the Johnny Depp trial, for example, the TMZ guy um, and the guy that worked in the glamping place in California or something like that. We saw the randos, so to speak, as Amber so eloquently put it. So they were volunteer witnesses. So they could have backed out at the same time. They were never issued any kind of a subpoena. However, in many cases where a witness has been issued a subpoena, that is the kind of thing that you can get into trouble if you try to ignore it. If the question is whether someone's been served a subpoena in the proper way, I should say. So for example, there's been a lot of heat online about the fact that Elon Musk was never served by Brown Rudnick. In order for somebody to have to show up for deposition or for trial, they have to be subpoenaed. Now, if you are a witness and you are not available to testify, that's a different matter. But you have to show that you're unavailable. You have to kind of say why, you give a reason why. So yeah, that should answer that. All right, cool. Back to the testimony.
And did you at that time believe your father was great?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Oziel also talked about the fact that your mother was miserable and your mother was suicidal and your mother couldn't live without your father. Were these things that you believed?
These were some of the things. Dr. Oziel didn't have a good understanding of my mother. I guess he didn't have as much contact with my mother, or my mother was always a very private person, so I guess she didn't open up to him. I don't know what it is, but he had a certain feeling about both my mom and my dad, and they were off in many respects, but that's what he believed. Certainly she was miserable and she was suicidal, but he didn't understand her.
And when he talked about your mother in those terms, did you disagree with him?
No.
Now,
and also, I totally forgot to mention this at the top of the hour, but trigger warning on everything, because there's been a lot of discussion throughout this case, and particularly through this direct testimony, about a lot of abuse, SA, all the stuff. The most horrific kind that you can imagine, just like absolutely horrific, and for it to be done by a parent, even worse. So all of the trigger warnings. Thank you, Draco Amy, for putting those in the chat. I'm saving these, and I'll pull them on screen from time to time. And of course, if you are having a very hard time and you need someone to talk to, these are mental health helplines for the United States, UK, Australia, Canada, and we've also got Germany and Greece. So thank you, Draco Amy, for putting these up, and I will put up the trigger warning just for general awareness.
Can you tell us, Mr. Menendez, concerning the session of November 2nd? Okay. Could you characterize, basically, what it was you were trying to convey and your brother was trying to convey in that session, and what it was Dr. Oziel was doing?
Well,
objection as to what his brother was trying to do.
Sustained.
Well, Your Honor,
Objection sustained.
Okay.
What?
Wait a second. She's gonna have to ask another question.
Yeah, I'm going to rephrase the question. Could you characterize what you and your brother were conveying and what Dr. Oziel was conveying? Do you understand the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to talk about different things. I was trying to get back to how depressed I was, and I wanted to know what I should do just in case I ever got so depressed that And
Did he address that when you brought that up? Did he deal with it, Dr. Oziel? Did he
no,
pick up
he
on
said
it?
he'd deal with it later, and he never got back to it. But we were talking about what mom and dad were like. That's what we decided to do, and that's what I felt like doing. And Dr. Oziel was talking about that, and he was talking about what we felt, and he was saying, no, you really don't understand. And I was saying, no, I don't understand. He says, I know I've got to do a lot of therapy with you, or a lot of hypnosis, he was saying, to get out your feelings. And he was really trying to get out why this all happened. And Lyle kept saying, I don't want to talk about why, I don't know why, and trying to stay away from it until Dr. Oziel would go away from it and then come back to it.
Okay, and did he have theories?
Yes.
Overall.
And were you presented with them?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you recall Dr. Oziel testifying that you and your brother both commented frequently throughout the session on how perfect the appearance of your family was to the outside world?
Yeah, he testified to that.
And what's the significance of that statement to you?
That's basically what we talked about how everyone thought my family was so wonderful, and really what a shambles it was. And especially the marriage between my mom and my dad.
And he testified to that also, that was one of the examples of how perfect it appeared and how bad it really was.
He didn't testify to that very much, but he did testify to that.
Was that very much, this notion of how perfect the family was in appearance and how false that was that very much what the conversation was about?
That was what almost all the conversation was about.
Now, did you sense, Mr. Menendez, during this session of November 2nd, that Dr. Oziel, in his theories, had come to certain conclusions about what had brought about the killing of your parents that were wrong?
Objection, legal.
Sustained.
Did you sense during the session that Dr. Oziel had formulated any conclusions?
I didn't sense it. He told us what he wasn't saying so much, I think this. He was saying, this is what happened. You don't really understand. And eventually I'll be able to explain it to you and you'll be able to understand.
All right. So you knew what his conclusions were?
Yes.
Objection, legal.
Sustained.
Did you know what his conclusions were from things that he said?
Yes.
Did you set him straight?
No.
Now, on either October 31st or November 2nd, did either you or your brother ever tell Dr. Oziel that you had formulated a plan to kill your parents?
No.
Did you ever tell him you formulated the perfect plan to kill your parents?
No.
On October 31st or November 2nd, did any of you, yourself, your brother, or Dr. Oziel, ever mention that your mother was probably or was in fact killed because she was a witness?
No.
When was the first you ever learned that Dr. Oziel was prepared to say that?
When I read his notes after I was arrested. And I didn't know he was prepared to say that then, though. I didn't know he was prepared to say that until I heard him testify.
So even after you read the notes, you didn't believe he really said
I read a lot of things.
Sustained.
All right. But the fact is, you didn't even know that.
Objection sustained to the form of the question.
What's annoying about that last one is, yes, there's leading, but what she's trying to do is to in a sense, like, summarize his testimony, like what he just said. So to be like, so in other words, what you're saying is this, and then he can answer yes or no, or he can, give some kind of clarity to that. So it's like, it's annoying that it seems like they're not exactly like listening to what it is that she actually asked. Anyway.
Before I get out.
Well, you start out in the way that you knew what the answer would be.
Okay,
Let's ask a different way.
You didn't hear that word witness used in the session?
In the session, definitely not.
Did you hear any talk about there was no way to kill your father unless you killed your mother?
No.
Mr. Menendez, in your family life, when you were living in Beverly Hills, was your family involved with another house? Did you have another house?
We were building the Calabasas house.
And who in your family was in charge of supervising the redoing and the remodeling of that house?
My dad gave that project to my mom.
So who was in charge of doing
My
it?
mom.
And did it take up much of her time?
Took up a fair amount of her time.
And who in your family, as between your mother and father, was in charge of paying all the bills and tracking the family finances? And
My mom.
And who was in charge of making sure that the house ran, that there were groceries, that there were, all the things?
My mom.
And who was in charge, in fact, of scheduling tennis tournaments and tennis matches and all that sports stuff for yourself and your brother?
My mom.
And were there times that when you and your brother would be alone at the house with your father?
Yes.
Was that rare or infrequent?
Almost every weekend.
And on the weekends, what would your mother be doing during the day?
She'd either go over to the Calabasas house to check out things, or she'd run errands or do whatever.
And as between your parents, which one of them on the weekends tended to get up earlier?
My mom. She got up early most of the time, and sometimes was out of the house by 8.
And what was your father's custom and habit with respect to the time he would get up on weekends?
He got up late.
Usually what time?
10, 11 o'clock. Every once in a while he slept till 12.
And when you and your brother would be home alone with your father, what would you guys be doing?
Usually playing tennis.
And what would your father do while you and your brother were playing tennis?
He was usually on the tennis court.
Now, can you, do you remember generally the sequence of the conversation on November 2nd? In other words, what was the start of the conversation and where did it go to from there?
It started with, I don't remember everything that happened in the conversation, but it started with him talking about the fact that he had these tapes in safety deposit boxes. And how he just wanted to let us know that, and that made us pretty nervous at that point.
Okay. And was there any discussion of confidentiality?
Yes.
And how? And you heard Dr. Oziel give you a statement about confidentiality?
When?
You're asking about his testimony or at the time of
At the
this
time,
conversation?
on November 2nd. Do you remember?
On November 2nd, he did, yes.
Okay. And what was your sense, based on what he was saying and what had occurred between October 31st and now at November 2nd, about confidentiality?
Well, he was telling me that he could go to the police if he felt threatened, and he said he had felt threatened. And so I wasn't sure what was confidential and what wasn't.
Now, Mr. Menendez, did you hear Dr. Oziel testify that in the preceding year, you heard we took him through his appointment records?
Yes.
Okay. And did you hear him testify that he had obtained from you waivers of confidentiality?
Yes, he did.
And that the purpose, he testified, the purpose of that was so he could report back to your parents?
Yes.
And during the preceding year when you knew Dr. Oziel, did you believe that what you were telling him was confidential?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Did you believe during the preceding year, having signed those waivers, did you believe that what you told him was confidential?
No, I knew they were either going to go to my father or my mother.
Apart from them, you thought it was confidential?
Yes.
Now, Do you recall this statement that Dr. Oziel made about your Jeep in the November 2nd session? Do you recall at the session what he said about it?
Yes, somewhat. Not completely, but somewhat.
You heard your brother testify that Dr. Oziel said he was worried looking down, thought you guys in your Jeep were plotting and planning stuff.
Yeah, I don't think he said he was looking down, but what I remember about it was that Dr. Oziel said something like, I pictured you guys sitting and talking in the Jeep or something like that.
Okay. And how did you react to that?
I said, boy, I wonder if this guy really is scared. I found it difficult to believe that he was so scared because I'm the one that went to him in the first place. And I'm the one that went to him talking about the fact that I wanted to kill myself. I certainly didn't want to harm him in any way. And so I was still having trouble believing that he was so scared, but the way he was talking about this Jeep thing and the fact that he had tapes and safety deposit boxes, I was thinking maybe he was.
Okay. And did that notion of yours that maybe he was, did that have any influence over how you talked to him or what you talked about?
Yes.
And what influence did it have?
It made me want to calm him down. It made me want to agree with him and let him know that, everything was fine.
Okay.
Looking at this from the defense perspective, I can see how someone coming from the experience of Erik's and Lyle's, having the parents that they had, wanting to always placate them, particularly their mother, who would periodically be very depressed, periodically be, make statements that she was going to, take them all with her essentially. And all of them wanting to sort of placate her, make her happy, make her, that kind of thing. I can understand that in a situation like this, where suddenly he's like born his entire soul to this therapist who now says that he feels threatened by them, feeling it's such a terrible place for Erik because he's just he's expressed so much vulnerability already, and even he didn't even tell them the worst stuff, but it's like he's expressed all of this stuff to make himself so vulnerable, and then this other person seems like he's got some kind of weird leverage over them, and so he's trying to placate him. I can understand, this makes sense from that kind of perspective. Of course, the prosecution side is like, that's all BS. But I can see it looking at it from their perspective, how his line of thinking would be like that in this moment, given his entire experience growing up, and then the situation that he has himself in right now, the level of vulnerability plus the fact that this other person that he's been vulnerable to, it now says that he perceives both him and his brother as threats.
Now, you said that most of the conversation had to do with discussions about your family and what your parents were like. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what the last topics were that were discussed?
I remember some of them, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us what those topics were?
Some of them were about the financial state that our family was in.
And how did that come up?
That came up, I remember briefly it came up in the middle of the conversation. I know it came up in the 31st.
Okay, tell me first then, how did it come up on the 31st?
When I was telling him about how depressed I was telling him that I was going to get all this money. And I was telling him that I just felt guilty about getting a lot of the money, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I felt like I had just killed my parents, and now I was getting all of their money. And I felt sort of guilty about that. I mean, I wanted to live, and I wanted to be able to live, but I felt guilty about getting all these things that they had worked for.
Okay. And how did it come up again on November 2nd?
It came up again when he brought it up, and he talked about the fact that we were going to get, I think it was $14 million, my Aunt Martha told me, or 15, something like that. It came up.
Let me stop you for a second. When your Aunt Martha was trying, this is in that conversation that you've previously told us about with your Aunt Martha and your brother and yourself?
Yes.
And that's the conversation where you testified you're basically arguing with her that you're not going to get any money, that you've been disinherited?
It wasn't an argument, but that's how the conversation went.
Well, you're disputing what she thinks she knows.
Sustain.
Were you disagreeing with your Aunt Martha?
Yes.
And that number, $14-15 million, did you know whether that was a gross number or a net number? Did you know the difference between gross and net?
I didn't really know the difference at that time.
So that was the numbers that stayed in your head?
Yes.
In fact, did you learn later that the estate wasn't worth anything like that?
Yes.
Objection sustained. The answer is true.
What did you learn later about the estate?
Just that it was worth, I think it was worth half that.
And that was was that before things were actually liquidated or sold, or after?
Yes, that was just what they thought it was going to be if they could sell things at this price, and that price was before the recession and so on.
Okay. So you were telling us how the financial issue was raised during the November 2nd session.
Yes.
Okay. And who raised it?
Dr. Oziel.
And what did he say?
I don't quite remember what he said in the middle of the session, but at the end of the session, he was talking about the fact that we were going to get this money, and that we should use it wisely, and that he had a lot of great ideas and a lot of good investment tips and a lot of good investment plans that just needed money, and that it could make a lot of money. And he showed us. I remember he showed us his business cards that he had on his desk, and was
He had more than one business card?
Yes.
Do you remember?
This part, of course, just feels so inappropriate. So inappropriate to be saying that you want to get into this like business relationship with your clients when he's like come to you because he's got some real mental health issues. Like, it's just the ethics here are just mind-boggling, in my opinion.
What?
I don't remember the name of the company, but I know he had like 3 different business cards. And what was he saying? He was saying that he was just talking about how he had these different companies that could make a lot of money. And aside from that, he had these different investments that he thought could do great. And that I remember he was saying that he was real stressed or real nervous from what had occurred on the 31st, and just talking all about it.
He was talking about being stressed and nervous at the same time that he was talking about his company's investment tips?
Yeah, well, he was talking about it in the sense that he was going to have to cut down on his work now because of the stress that he was now under, and how he thought that it would be really preferable if Lyle and I could invest with him, and then everyone would be happy. That's essentially what he was saying.
Mind-boggling.
How did you
mind-boggling
interpret that?
I interpret that as he wanted to be a part of when the money was going to come in.
And how did you feel about that?
If it would calm him down and if it would relax him, then fine. I mean, he's
in other words, extortion. Like he's feeling extorted. That's what's going on here.
Said that, if it was gonna make things okay, then that's fine. And I didn't have the sense anymore that he was so much afraid. I didn't have that sense at all, and it was strange. And I thought I was just confused or I was getting it mixed up, but it was. If it was going to relax him, then fine. He was saying he was stressed, and if it was going to solve that, then fine. He could do what he wanted.
Okay. And at the end of the session, well, strike that. At any time towards the end of the session, did he ever get back to your depression or your guilt?
No.
Now, Mr. Menendez, on October 31st, when you were alone with Dr. Oziel.
Interesting. So never talked about his depression after that. Like Dr. Zeal never brought it up again. Very interested in his money, though, that he was about to supposedly come into. Gah!
Did the subject matter of your dealing with your guilt by turning yourself into the police ever come up?
No.
Did he ever tell you that anything about the way to deal with that guilt was to face the music, basically?
Actually, he was doing the opposite. He was telling us that where we had the guns was not a safe place, and he was actually helping us deal with the opposite.
When was that?
That was during those 2 sessions. I think
was
it
that-
was during the November 2nd, because I don't think it was during the November 31st. There
You
wasn't
mean
time.
October 30th?
I mean October 31st.
So on November 2nd, he's giving you suggestions about.
Yes.
Now, you didn't see that in his notes, did you?
No, that was not in his notes. He didn't have anything of those sort of conversations in his notes.
He didn't have any. There's nothing in his notes about giving you financial advice either, is there?
No, that's what I mean by I didn't know what he was going to testify to.
So I take it did not come up on the November 2nd either that the appropriate way to deal with this problem might be to turn yourself in.
No.
Sustain, the answer stricken.
Did the issue of turning yourselves in ever come up on November 2nd?
No.
And after the November 2nd session, Mr. Menendez, was your depression abated? Were you feeling less guilty? Were you less suicidal?
No, not at all.
You weren't any better.
No.
During the course of the November 2nd session, how were you feeling emotionally?
How was I feeling emotionally during the session?
How were you feeling?
I don't even remember. I was feeling a lot of different things. When I thought he was afraid at the beginning, I thought, boy, I can't believe how I screwed this all up and just made a mess of the whole situation. At the end, I was sort of a little suspicious. In the middle, I was crying most of the time.
Well, what was being discussed in the middle?
Mom and Dad's relationship, just basically what the family was, why it was really not this wonderful family that everyone thought.
Okay, let me go back with you now to October 31st of that session, to some of the details that you gave him. You've heard Dr. Oziel testify about what you supposedly told him concerning the sequence of events after the shooting.
I heard Dr. Zeal testify to that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Did he testify accurately with respect to what you told him?
No.
And how was he inaccurate?
He left out some things. He got it all jumbled up and mixed up.
Okay. What specifically did he leave out?
He left out that we went to the theater.
The movie theater?
Yeah, he didn't say we went to the theater anytime that night, and I'm sure he left out. I don't really remember. I haven't seen the notes.
Okay, but he didn't
Wow.
testify here in court that you told him that you went to the movies at some point after.
No.
You have a question, John?
Yes. Okay,
I guess.
we'll find out.
Right. All right, Mr. Menendez, I was talking to you, I was asking you about the conversation that you had with Dr. Oziel before your brother arrived on October 31st, wherein you were giving him some details about the night of your parents' death. Okay? You focused on where we are?
Yes.
All right. Did you ever tell Dr. Oziel, in describing how the shooting occurred, that you surprised your parents?
I doubt it. I don't know.
You doubt it?
I may have.
Well, why would you
I
say-
said we ran in on him, so I don't.
But the question is, do you believe you used the word surprise?
No, it's not the kind of word I would use in that situation, so I don't think I did.
Okay. Did you Did you know after your parents were killed who you had shot? Did you know who you had shot? I mean, apart from your parents, did you know if you shot your father, if you shot
Oh,
your
no,
mother?
no.
And did you ever tell Dr. Oziel any specifics about who shot whom?
No.
Did you mention to him, however, the fact that there was a reloading?
Yes.
Did you tell him that both guns were reloaded, or did you not tell him that?
No, I didn't tell him that.
Were both guns reloaded?
No.
Did you say anything to Dr. Oziel on the 31st about your father making a noise or a sound or something when you came into the room, after you got into the room?
Yes.
And what did you tell him that your father said or did?
I told him my father said no.
And how did you describe the tone or the implication of that no?
It was a very rough, demanding tone.
And were you already firing when you heard that?
Yes.
What did you think your father was trying to do?
I thought he was ordering us to stop firing.
Now, did Dr. Oziel at any time after you talked to him about the details, I'll strike that. Did Dr. Oziel during the November 2nd session bring those details up again?
No.
Did he ever ask you to verify that things that he had put in his notes were accurate?
No, he would not have done that.
He would not have done that on November 2nd?
No.
Why?
Objection calls for speculation.
Why did you say that?
Because then I'd know what he put in his notes, and I'd know that they weren't accurate. So he wouldn't have shown them to me.
Okay. But my point is, he told you that he had, first of all, when you were telling Dr. Oziel on October 31st the details of the crime, what was your demeanor?
I was crying.
And he wasn't taking notes.
No.
And you weren't taking notes.
No.
And there wasn't any tape recorder going, trying to get it down, was there?
No.
And on November 2nd, he didn't go over with you to see if he had heard you correctly, did he?
No.
Now, what was your attitude with respect to Dr. Oziel after the session of November 2nd? Was he someone you felt you could rely upon? Was he someone you felt you could trust? What?
No. I was really suspicious by the end because of all the statements that because he wasn't really talking about fear anymore. He was talking about money and his stress, and I was a little confused and a little suspicious and a little, I don't even know how to describe how I was feeling.
And you had gone to him originally for help with an emotional problem?
Yeah, I was extremely depressed, and I didn't like the fact that when I tried to bring that up, he'd always say, "We'll talk about it later." Either I didn't understand a lot of things.
Now, you heard, did you hear Dr. Oziel during the session of November 2nd talk about how helpful he could be to you and your brother?
Yes.
Did you put any credence in that? Did you believe that that was true?
No. At first, I thought he might have been talking about in terms of my depression. And then I realized he wasn't, and I didn't think he'd be helpful any other way.
Were you concerned, Mr. Menendez, that at some point you might indeed be arrested for this, or be put on trial?
I thought I eventually would be.
And was that something that had occurred to you between August 20th and November 2nd?
Yes.
Did you think as of November 2nd that Dr. Oziel would be a useful witness for you?
No.
Is there some reason why you could tell Dr. Oziel that you had killed your parents, but couldn't tell him the things that your father had done to you all those years?
Yes.
And why do you think that was?
It was because I just felt so guilty about killing my parents, and I had tried to tell different people about that, but there was no way that I was going to talk about what happened between my dad and I. It was so close in time to when it happened. I just couldn't talk about it. I was much too ashamed to even deal with it.
Let me ask you this. Over the years, had you been tempted to tell people about the fact that your father was having sex with you?
Definitely not. No, never a temptation.
Was that something that you, in fact, tried to do the opposite with? What did you want to do with that information, with those facts of what was going on between you and your father?
I wanted to keep it as secret as possible and bury it and throw it in the ocean and have it disappear, basically.
And do you know what prompted you to tell the one person you did tell, your cousin Andy?
Because that was because I was trying to understand. I was really beginning to really question what was happening between my dad and I never questioned it before. And I sort of wanted to find out from Andy if this had ever happened to him, if this was some sort of thing that happened to people, and it was normal, or was I strange? And
Did you tell your cousin Andy to get his help?
no.
Your Honor, I think that might conclude the joint testimony.
And how long will the examination before the one jury take?
About an hour.
All right, what we'll do then is take a recess, and as far as the,
Oh, let me just have one moment to confirm.
certainly. And what we'll do is have the
So,
blue jury return at 5 minutes to 11. Give us about a 15-minute break, a little longer than that. And the gold jury.
all right. So they're gonna take out one of the juries. This is gonna be Lyle's jury is gonna be leaving. So, and then they're gonna talk about some stuff in between, argue about some stuff. So we will be skipping through that, and then we'll get right back to testimony here. Let me see. Here we go.
The blue jury back in court. You may proceed with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, I want to turn your attention back to September of 1989. At that time, you received some insurance money. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did you do with the money?
It went to my Aunt Martha.
Did you give it to her for herself, or was she supposed to do something
No, she
with
was
it?
going to hold it and keep it or invest it for me in some way. She's a stockbroker.
And were you to have access to any of that money?
Yes.
And what was the relationship? If you wanted to get something or buy something or do something, how would you go about doing it?
She gave me a checkbook and a credit card, and I would be allowed to, I guess, buy my daily necessities from that, or small things. If anything large I was going to do that I guess I couldn't do through that, I would call her on the phone and she would send the money.
Had you ever managed money before?
No,
Had you maintained a checkbook?
no,
Had you had a credit card?
no.
Did you feel competent to do those things?
To manage it?
To manage the kind of money you got from the insurance?
You mean in terms of receipts or things like that?
I mean, did you feel competent to handle that money yourself, to invest it on your own?
No.
Now, the jury's heard testimony about this deposit receipt that was made on a condominium at the Marina City Club. You recall that testimony?
Yes,
You recall that was a day that you were there with your brother and with Noel Nedley?
yes.
And who was Noel Nedley?
He eventually became my roommate that I lived with
And you lived with him where?
at the Marina City Club.
And you were renting at the time?
Yes,
And did Mr. Nedley contribute to the rent?
yes.
And do you know where Mr. Nedley's mother lived?
She lived at the Marina City Club
And why was it that you ever went to the Marina City Club for any purpose?
because he wanted to live there. He thought it was the best place to live because his mother was right next door and she would be able to cook dinner for us or do things like that. And so he brought us over there to look for places.
Who's he?
Noel.
And did you know his mother?
Yes.
Now, were you attempting to purchase a condominium at the Marina City Club?
No,
Why did you write the deposit check?
because I was loaning the money to Lyle. Lyle either didn't have his checkbook or I don't remember the details, but I had called my Aunt Martha to ask if I could give Lyle this money and turn it over and how it would work out with the money in the account. Because if I was going to do something that large, I had to call her. So I did, and I loaned him the money.
Did you know what the balance in your account was that day before you wrote the check?
No.
Tell us, Mr. Menendez, your recollection of how the purchase of the Rolex watches occurred.
It occurred when I was getting a jacket to wear to the funeral.
Okay, were you getting a jacket in the jewelry store?
No, we were waiting for it to get, I guess it was a little bit too big in the sleeves or maybe around the waist. I'm not quite sure. I didn't have a jacket to wear. So we were waiting
Where was the jacket purchased?
at Bullock's.
And it needed to be altered?
Yes.
And was it going to be altered right then, or was it going to be altered a few days later?
No, right then.
So you were waiting for the alteration.
We were waiting, and as we were waiting, we went into different stores.
So did you go into stores other than the jewelry store?
Yes, we went into many different stores.
And was there any discussion before the jewelry store about buying anything?
No,
And do you recall whose idea it was to go to the jewelry store?
I don't know if it was anyone's idea. It was just one of the stores that we went into. We had a while to wait, so we went into the jewelry store.
Now, was this at the Century City Mall?
Yes,
And is the jewelry store on the same side of the mall as Bullock's?
I have no idea.
You don't remember?
I don't even remember the jewelry store. I don't really have a very good recollection. I just remember we were going into a lot of different stores.
What do you mean you don't remember the jewelry store?
I remember that we bought watches there, but I don't remember the actual store.
You don't remember what it looks like?
I don't remember what it looks like. I didn't remember the lady that came in that I guess we bought them from. I don't have a good recollection of it.
So do you remember the transaction?
I remember part of the transaction. At least I remember the remembrance of it. I talked to Detective Zoller about it on the 17th.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Do you have any recollection of picking out any watches
No,
yourself?
no,
Do you have any recollection of wanting a Rolex watch before you were inside the jewelry store?
no, I hadn't thought about it.
And what happened to you? Wound up with what kind?
I wound up with a silver one. Lyle asked me.
Was it silver or was it stainless steel? Do you know?
It was stainless steel.
Lyle asked you what you wanted.
Yeah, he was. It was in the. We were in the store, and he was looking at the different watches, and I know it's something that Lyle liked. He liked watches. He had always wanted a watch, and so as he was looking at them, I said, "Why don't you buy one?" And he did.
He bought two, actually.
Yes, he bought two.
And what happened to the stainless steel one that you got?
I lost it in some way, somewhere, somehow.
You don't know?
No, I don't know exactly how. It disappeared one day
From where?
from my apartment.
Your apartment in the Marina City Club?
Yes.
And do you remember how long you had it before it disappeared?
3 months, 2 months.
Oh my
Did
god.
this disappear like your diaries disappeared?
Yes.
Magic?
I didn't think it was magic.
You thought someone took it, didn't you?
Yes.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you think someone took it?
Yes.
So this whole part about the watches, of course, it's important because the prosecution had this argument that these guys went on this whole shopping spree afterwards, and this indicates that they killed their parents for the money, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I mean, one way or another, it's better for it to come out on direct examination. This kind of information, just like it was with Lyle. But this shows that they were so casual and not at all circumspect about their spending habits or about how they kept track of these very expensive items. 3 months in, I mean, he just said he thought maybe he had been robbed, but if the same thing happened with his diary, who's gonna steal your diary? I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember exactly when the diary disappeared, if it was after or before his parents died, because if it was before, yeah, maybe mom took it. She swiped it and did something with it. That's entirely possible. But if it's afterwards, who's going to steal a diary, right? That's not exactly valuable to anyone unless you want the information that's provided in it. But generally speaking, yeah, like they seem overall very lackadaisical about spending a lot of money. And at this point in time, they're still young adults. Oftentimes that happens when you don't work for your money and you don't have a good, strong understanding of the sacrifice that it takes in order to earn that kind of money. But this is one of those things that could be a massive turnoff to a jury, depending on where they come from. Let me answer some questions here from some folks, because I've been saving them. If I see them in the chat, and especially if you tag me, I see them and I save them. So just for anybody that is unaware, Tish says, what do you think about this judge? Is he average, more or less what one can expect? Is he good / bad? I think I wouldn't say that every single decision that he makes is like this, but he does, to me, he does seem to have a little bit of a bias in favor of the prosecution. He at least comes across that way. He seems to be very severe with the witnesses that the defense puts on. He did not have that same level of severity with the witnesses that the prosecution had put on. That could just be, evidence that he has lost his patience with the attorneys on the defense, maybe, but you're still you still shouldn't allow yourself as a judge to have that appearance of different treatment to one, between one side's case in chief and the others. So it does look to me like he's got some pro state bias. Yeah. Janet G, is this an old case that you're just replaying and reviewing? Yes, this is from 1993, so it's 30 years old now. We're reviewing it because it's one of the biggest trials that has happened in the United States, and it's one of those that has shaped our culture in a lot of ways. And it's one that people talk about it, and I had realized that I had never seen this case before, and so I wanted an opportunity to watch it and to share the experience with a bunch of people. So we are watching it and commenting on it, and yeah, hopefully all learning something together. Debbie Faison Cook, why can't Lyle's jury hear this? I don't know exactly what their determination was for excluding Lyle's jury from this testimony, but my guess is that it's not relevant enough to Lyle's testimony. Yes, he's referenced Lyle like once or twice, but most of this so far has been just about Erik and his state of mind and his expenses and what his experience was with, buying the Rolexes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I think that may be why they have been excluded. I don't know. Maybe we'll get into some testimony in a minute that'll highlight a more like a different reason or a stronger reason or something like that. Okay. All right. Let's continue on.
Now, the jury's heard testimony about furniture that you purchased. Did anybody assist you in selecting that furniture?
Yes.
And who was that?
My Aunt Martha.
They've heard about a car that you bought. Did anybody assist you in shopping for that car and buying it?
Yes.
And who was that?
Steve Goldberg.
And were you seeking advice on what to buy and what to do and what to do with money from various adults?
Objection.
Well, with the
Objection sustained. The answer is straight.
Were you seeking advice from adults?
yes,
Advice with regard to what?
advice with regard to what to do with all this money. Whether it should just sit in a bank. I didn't know really. I never really handled money like that before, so I didn't know what to do with it.
What about advice concerning purchases? Were you seeking that kind of advice from anyone?
Objection, Rudy.
Overruled.
Not about the Jeep, but about what to do with the money. Steve suggested that I purchase real estate,
But what about
and Martha
the Jeep?
wanted me to invest it in stocks.
Why did you have a lawyer with you to buy a Jeep, Mr. Menendez?
Because I'd never bought a car. I didn't know how to really go buy a car. I wasn't a good negotiator. I didn't. Steve was a friend of mine, so he came over to really do it for me.
He was the lawyer for the probate estate, wasn't he?
Yes.
Now, you said you were receiving advice concerning purchasing real estate.
Yeah, that was what Steve suggested, that I purchase real estate.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Was anyone else giving you advice about purchasing real estate?
Yes.
Who was that?
My cousin Henry.
Did you ever purchase real estate?
No. Actually, there was someone else too.
Someone else to what?
That was giving me advice about the real estate.
Who else?
My Uncle Brian.
And what was your Uncle Brian's occupation?
He was a real estate developer, so that's what he really wanted me to go into.
And did you have discussions with him about the future and investment?
Yes.
Was there any discussion about, well, what were the discussions? Was there any discussion about him being involved in any way?
Well, yeah. He wanted to do it with me, and he said this is the best thing to go into. And I said, I don't know anything about it. And he said, I know everything about it. So he thought it was a great idea.
He said, who knew everything about it?
He knew everything about it. That's what he does for a living. So
Okay, let me show you. I want to return to a photograph that's been up before. You marked this photograph, which is of the bed in your bedroom, correct? This is 258.
yes.
Did you buy something for this bed after you moved into the Marina City Club?
Yes.
May I inquire what's next door?
$275.
Thank you. We show you this document, this receipt. This is W.B. Shed Bed Designs. Do you recognize that receipt, Mr. Menendez?
Yes.
And what did you purchase on that receipt?
3 padded bumper guards.
3 padded bumpers?
Yes.
For what?
For the edges of the bed. I wasn't allowed to purchase those before, so when I moved in.
Menendez? Could you wait for a question?
Sure.
What's the date on the receipt?
11/30/89.
And how much did the 3 bumper pads cost?
$74.49.
And they were to go over what part of the bed?
The wooden edges of the bed, it had 3 sides, and they were supposed to go over those.
And how long had you had that bed before your parents died?
Almost 3 years.
And did you have some kind of problem with the edges of the bed?
Yes.
And what were the edges of the bed like?
They were very sharp, very hard edges, not round edges. They were cut and sharp.
Now you're pointing to a side of the witness box. Were they like the edges on the side of the witness box?
No, not at all. These are rounded so that they're not sharp. The other ones were pointed.
And was there some reason why it was a problem to you that the edges of the bed were sharp and not rounded?
When I was living with my parents, yes.
And what was the reason that was a problem?
Because I'd have to kneel on the edge of the bed during sometimes the mirror and during sex.
And who made you kneel on the edges of the bed?
My father.
And would that hurt?
Yes.
And had you, why didn't you have these bumper pads for the bed while you were living with your parents?
He didn't want me to have the bumper pads on the edge of the bed.
How did you know he didn't want you to?
Because I said that the bed is supposed to have bumper pads, and he said, I don't want them to have bumper pads.
Had you asked for them?
Yes.
Who did you ask?
My father.
Did you ever discuss it with your mother?
I discussed it with my mother after I discussed it with my father.
What did you discuss with your mother?
The fact that the bed was supposed to have bumper pads because for that reason it was sharp edges. And she said, ask your father.
Now, the jury's also heard testimony that you had a contract with Mr. Heffernan to play tennis, for him to coach you rather full-time.
Yes.
And when did you decide to play tennis full-time and to train and to hire a coach?
In late October, I believe.
Now, were you scheduled, you've testified you were supposed to go to college that fall.
Yes, I was.
And why didn't you just go to college?
I didn't think I'd be able to. I tried to go to Princeton to be with Lyle. And once I found out I was going to have to be in a different college, and even college altogether, I didn't think I'd be able to do it right away. I was having a lot of trouble concentrating. I was in a lot of bad states, and I figured I would try to wait a year.
Did you think you could get through college on your own?
No,
Who would be missing?
my parents.
And what was your expectation about your parents when you went to college?
That they were going to help me and pretty much do a lot of the work.
Had they always done that?
Yes.
Did you think you could get through college without them?
Some colleges, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get to UCLA, though.
Now, you said that it was a major problem. I mean, it was the sort of triggering event when your father told you you'd have to come home
Objection, Louis.
some
Sustained.
nights. This has already been testified to, Your Honor.
Well, just ask a different way.
Do you recall your testimony that your father told you that you'd have to come home to and stay home
Yes.
while you were in college. You know, you just testified you expected them to help you with your work.
Regarding staying home, yes, objection sustained.
When your father said you'd have to be home at night, what did you understand that to mean?
I understand.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
You recall the conversation that you had with your father just before he left on his business trip.
Yes.
What did he tell you about coming home from UCLA?
He said that I was going to have to be home to study and work, and that I was going to have to sleep there several nights a week.
And had that been your expectation before, that you'd have to sleep there?
No, definitely not.
Was it? Did you have expectations, though, about going up and back from the school to your home?
Yes.
Had you, in fact, had your parents purchased something for you to allow you to go up and back?
A moped.
And did you get that when?
I got that at graduation.
So did you expect to spend time at home, even though you were attending UCLA?
Yeah, I figured that college was the type of atmosphere where you had a lot of days off, time in between classes. And so I thought I would be having lunch or doing the laundry at home and things like that.
Did you have any expectation, though, of having to sleep at home?
No, I definitely was not planning on doing. I didn't even really want to be home at night, but definitely didn't want to sleep there.
Now, with respect to this decision to play tennis, you said you were having trouble concentrating. That was one of the reasons you couldn't go to college?
Yes.
What did you think tennis would do?
I thought tennis was something I always did to relax, to get my mind off things. And although I had trouble sometimes, it was sort of soothing for me. And it was the only thing I really knew how to do well. And so I just decided that Mark was a good friend of mine and to try out tennis.
Mark, you mean Heffernan?
Yes, he was my coach.
Okay, you said he was your friend. He was your coach, wasn't he?
Yes.
And after you made this arrangement with Mr. Heffernan, what was your schedule like?
My schedule was 8 in the morning.
Come forward a little bit.
It was from 8 in the morning until, at first it was till 5 at night, and then it went from 8 till 7.
And that was training with him?
Yes.
He was with you all that time?
Yes, all day.
Did you do anything when he wasn't with you?
Did I do anything when he wasn't with me?
Yeah, with respect to tennis or training.
No, he was with me from 8 till 5 or 8 till 7 eventually.
And then what'd you do with the rest of your time?
I didn't have much time else. I ate dinner, and my roommate was there, and pretty much went to sleep around 10:30.
Now, I want to go back with you, if we can, till the end of August of 1989. Do you remember you were in New York for the funeral?
Yes.
And were you planning to go back to Los Angeles in any event after the funeral, or were you planning on staying in New Jersey for some period of time?
I really had no plans. I didn't think one day to the next, really. I didn't know what was going to happen when. I mean, I knew I had one thing to do in New Jersey, which was about the computer. But
It's one thing to do in New Jersey.
I mean, in California. But, I didn't have plans for things.
I want to go back before that. You knew about this computer thing, Mr. Menendez. When you left California to go to New Jersey, what was your purpose in going to New Jersey?
For the funeral.
And what was your plan at that time about coming back?
I had no plans.
So you didn't know when you'd be back to California?
I didn't have any need to go back to California. I didn't have any need to stay in New Jersey. I didn't have plans.
So you didn't have any idea when you'd be coming back to California. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, when you were in New Jersey, did something come up that led you to come back to California?
Yes.
And what was it?
Carlos Menendez telling me about the computer.
Had you had a discussion with another member of your family before you talked to Carlos Menendez about the computer?
I'm Not sure. I'm not really sure how it all got started. I know I was talking to Eileen and Carlos Menendez at the same time, but
Before you left California, did you know anything at all about anything of significance having to do with the computer?
no, I knew nothing.
So what's the first thing that you heard when you were in New Jersey about the computer?
Carlos Menendez telling me he wanted to get into the computer.
And did he tell you why?
Yes, there were some files on the computer that he wanted to look into.
And that was the first information you had about it.
Objection, reading.
Sustained.
Was that the first information you had about it?
Yes, that was
Say
the
yes to time also.
Overall.
that was the first information. It was at the reception.
And do you know what day that was?
It was either the day or the day after when all the family got together in New Jersey. It was either the day or the day after the funeral. I don't remember.
Do you remember what day the funeral was on?
No.
Now, after Carlos Menendez told you he wanted to get into the computer, did you hear anything more about the computer from any other members of your family?
There was a lot of talk about the computer. I know my uncle Carlos Baralt knew about the computer, but Carlos wanted to get into it through me, and I said fine. I didn't have any plans to do anything either way, so I told him that that's fine, and I went to talk to Eileen.
What was it that he wanted to get into on the computer?
There were 3 files: Menendez, will, and I think the last one was list. I don't remember now.
And what was his purpose? What did he tell you was his reason?
He wanted to find out if there was a will on the computer.
Carlos Menendez.
Yes.
Well, what did Carlos Baralt have to say about that, if anything? Did you talk to him about it?
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about it. And he said, because Carlos Menendez was bringing it up, and Carlos Baralt said, it doesn't matter. It's something in the order of, it doesn't matter if there's a will on the computer because somebody has to sign it. Something like that.
Okay.
Carlos Baralt wasn't that interested.
This is what I've said is, if it's in the computers in 1993, I believe, don't have PDF capabilities. So any version of the will that's going to be in the computer is going to be like essentially a Word document version that has not yet been signed, therefore not a validly executed will. So like all of this hubbub about the will, I don't personally understand it. I'm with Carlos Baralt on this one, where he's like, if there is one, who cares? Because it's not relevant to anything. It's not a valid will. It's just a piece of paper. Not even a piece of paper because it's digital. Oh my God, she's being adorable right now. So sorry about the distraction. So yeah, okay. I've said this before, talking about the will, that I didn't quite understand why all of this focus has been placed on it. But anyway, all right. Continue on.
Interested. He didn't want to fly all the way back to California to find out what was in it. And
Yes, it's not being received for the truth of what was said, only to reflect the state of mind of the witness here.
Now, how did Eileen get involved in this?
I went to Eileen and asked her if she could help me out. I wasn't sure whether Carlos Menendez was going to do it with his. He didn't talk about him having a computer guy go and look into the computer. He just said he wanted to look into the computer.
So you
And
approached Eileen?
Yeah, because Eileen worked with IBM, which was the name of the computer, and so I figured she would.
So the sound just got really low. If you guys are experiencing that, it's not you, it's not your system, it's the court TV feed. So I apologize for that.
Know either how to get into the computer or through somebody that might be able to get into the computer.
Now, did you have any interest in looking in this computer?
Yes,
And what was your interest in looking at the computer?
I thought there might be some writings of my mother's in the computer that I wanted to see.
Who used this computer in your family?
It was my mom's computer.
And why did you think there might be some writings of your mother's in it?
Because, in a letter that my Uncle Brian had found, she talked about the fact that there was She had left letters, places, different things like that. I thought they might be suicide letters. I didn't know exactly what, but anything that my mom wrote at that time, I wanted to find.
Your Uncle Brian had found a letter, a handwritten letter from your mother,
Yes,
and there was some reference in that letter to some other letters.
yes.
Was there a reference to letters on the computer?
No, I think it was a reference to Lester Summerfield, her psychiatrist, but somebody checked. I asked.
Yeah, sorry about the sound differentiation. That's all in the original feed from Court TV. So apologize if anybody just had their ears blown out. Courtney Place, did I see you in the chat? Yeah, sorry about that. Hopefully we won't be dealing with any more like that moving forward.
I think I asked my uncle to check with that man, and he said he didn't know anything about a letter. So I thought maybe my mom put letters other places. I wasn't sure, but anything on the computer with my mom's thoughts, I really wanted to see at that time.
Lester Summerfield was your mother's therapist?
Yes,
And are you saying someone checked with him to see if he had the letter?
that was my understanding.
I hadn't finished the question. To see if he had the letter that was referred to in the letter your Uncle Brian had?
Yes,
Why did you want to see your mother's writings?
because I missed my mom a great deal, and I just wanted to see more who she was, because I realized that last week that I didn't know who she was, and I got angry with her at one point, and I just was feeling really bad, and I wanted to find anything from my mom.
And did you tell that to your cousin Eileen?
Yes,
That's why you wanted to look?
yes.
Did you have any interest in whether or not there was a will on the computer?
My uncle Brault said that, Carlos said that there was no will in the computer.
My question was, did you have any
Objection
interest?
sustained. The answer is stricken.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you have any interest in whether there was or not at that point?
No,
So was there some arrangement that was made, as far as you understood, with Eileen to provide someone?
yes,
And then was there some change that you became aware of in the arrangements?
yes. Carlos Menendez had told me that he had talked to Eileen and canceled Eileen or something like that, and that actually it was Carlos Menendez's people that were going to go.
Okay. And did it matter to you whose people went?
No, I didn't care.
So was there some arrangement made for you to be at the house in Beverly Hills in order to meet a computer person?
Yes,
And did you return to California to do that?
yes.
Now, let me just fast forward for a minute here. How long did you stay in California that trip?
The trip back,
Yes.
maybe 10 days, not sure.
Now, did you have any discussion with your brother before you left New Jersey to come back to the house for the computer person about this computer business?
Yes,
And what was the discussion?
I had talked to him. I didn't know my brother didn't know anything about this. And so in a conversation, I guess it was 2 or 3 days before, I'm not sure, I mentioned that I guess he wanted to know where I was going to be at some
what you
point.
said.
I'm
Okay.
trying to explain it. And
Well, that's-
I mentioned that I was going to be going back to California for this computer thing, and that I wouldn't have been around at that time or something like that. And he said, "What computer thing?"
Okay, so did you told him what was about the arrangements that had been made?
Yes.
Okay. And did he tell you, well, I'm going to fly out there before you get there and do something?
No, he just said, "Oh, okay. I didn't know you were going to do that."
Did he tell you before he did it that he was going to come to California and do something on the computer?
No.
So when you flew to California, did you have any idea that your brother had already gotten here?
No, I had no idea.
And in fact, when you got to the house, did one of the security guards give you something?
They gave me a note
And who was the note from?
from my brother.
And could you tell if it was his handwriting or not?
No, it wasn't his handwriting.
And did that concern you?
That definitely concerned me.
Yes? Was that yes?
Yes.
Did the note, however, make reference to where your brother's whereabouts?
Objection, leading.
What did the note say?
The note said that
Objection, hearsay.
Is it being offered for the truth? of
No,
what's
Your
said?
Honor.
Okay, it'll be received only to reflect the state of mind of the witness on reading it.
Go ahead.
the note said that he had been there and that he had done something with the computer, and for me not to be concerned about that if the security guard mentioned that he was there or something in that order, and it was really surprising to me.
So did you try to reach him?
Yeah, I didn't know what this was. I mean, I figured that if he was going to leave me a note that he was there, he was going to write it in his own handwriting, and it wasn't. So
So-
I tried to reach him.
Did you believe then that he had been there at that point?
I wasn't sure.
Now, when you came back to California from New Jersey for this purpose, did someone pick you up at the airport?
Yes.
Who picked you up at the airport?
Objection, taken as the time.
Overall,
Casey Whalen.
And where did Casey Whalen take you?
He took me to the house.
And was Casey Whalen there when the computer person was working on the machine?
Yes.
Was Craig Signorelli also there?
No, Craig wasn't there.
You heard Craig Signorelli testify that he was there.
Yes.
Is that true?
No, he was lying.
Now, at some point in the future, did you tell Craig Signorelli about the computer and will files being or not being erased?
Yeah, I told him about it.
Now, is there any doubt in your mind, Mr. Menendez, as to which one of your friends was there that day?
No, Casey was definitely there.
So yeah, this is a very crucial point here because Craig Signorelli testified that he was there when the computer guy was there, as did Casey. But Casey has blonde hair, Craig has brown hair, and so I think one of the original descriptors by the computer guy as to which friend was there was that he was blonde. So, but the reason why that is crucial is because Craig Signorelli testified to, like, that they were looking for the will, that they were, that there were all these reasons for it, and he kind of helped with the prosecution's argument that they were, searching for this will because this was a whole inheritance thing. So, yeah, but Casey, on the other hand, had a very different recollection as to what that whole thing was. It was like Erik was barely even cared about it, really. Love Dreaming Peach says, why Craig lied for clout, fame. I don't know. We'd have to ask him. But the impression seemed to be that he kind of enjoyed the limelight. That's my personal impression. I haven't looked at his like other interviews and stuff that I think he did on with the media, but from watching him on the witness stand, he definitely seemed a little slick in his direct examination, and then on cross examination, he looked like he had been a little bit too slick in his direct examination. So I couldn't speak to exactly why anyone lies on the stand, but I did not personally trust his testimony at all after his cross-examination. Let me answer some more questions here, and then we will get on with it. Nico Kiski says, will the jury get to review the court record later when they deliberate the verdict? No, they don't get to review the court record. The reason for the court record is to preserve any kind of appealable issues. So all of the testimony that is in, all of the decisions that are made by the judge. Everything has to be on the record for the purposes of potentially appeal. So, that's why I think it was Courtney Place. I know you were talking about how it seems silly to be striking answers because the jury hears an answer anyway when the witness, gives an answer when they aren't supposed to, or sometimes a question gets asked in a different way. And so, then they can answer properly. But the reason for striking answers isn't necessarily, it is for the jury. It is because they're not supposed to hear information that they're not supposed to hear. But the reason for it is more so for the record. Guinevere Greenstone says, question, isn't the relevance of the will that it speaks to motive, i.e. that they needed to end their parents before a new will disinherited them? That is correct. That's the relevance of the will, and that's why it's coming in. I don't disagree with that at all. I definitely think that it is absolutely relevant to be talking about it at trial. But I understand that that's the prosecution's angle here. But to me, it just doesn't make sense that there even was any focus on it at all because of the fact that the will, quote unquote, that was on the computer isn't a will. It's just a digital document that doesn't represent any kind of a valid legal document. Like a piece of paper doesn't become a will until it has certain formalities. That includes having, the person who's giving money, the person who is going to be managing the money, like the executor or trustee, if you're establishing a trust, so the grantor, trustee, beneficiary or beneficiaries, something that is going to be going to the beneficiary, some kind of money, some kind of gift, some kind of something. It's got to have something in the estate. And then, and it's got to be signed. Either that, or it has to be a holographic will, can be a handwritten one, where it's in the writing of the, of the grantor, the person whose estate it is. So there are certain formalities that if they don't exist, it's not that it's a less valid document or that it's, a less weighted document. No, it's not a legal document at all. It's just a piece of paper. That's all it is until it's properly signed. So anyway, so to me, it all of this effort about it just feels, it just feels like a bit of a waste of time because, they also testified to the fact that they said that they had been disinherited. Of course, that is them testifying on their behalf. There's no corroboration of that so far, other than the two of them corroborating each other. But they're both criminal defendants here. So how much can they corroborate one another? Without something, right? Like some kind of writing, well, they didn't have text messages. I was about to say text message, but like some kind of statement or some other witness that heard it, like that's the hard part about this. And so I understand why there are probably people who don't believe what they said when they said, no, they disinherited us. You have to either believe or disbelieve the defendants when they say it. Tish says, how did they find and pick which lawyers they wanted? If you would make a guess, do you think they knew about these lawyers before or that people recommended these lawyers? I actually have no idea, but there are people in the chat that have been like Menendez case historians. They've watched this trial maybe multiple times and have read books and all that other stuff. They probably will know the story of how these guys found their lawyers. I don't know that personally, but some other folks. I'm hoping someone else in the chat can answer that. Guinevere Greenstones, was Craig the one that kept talking about writing a screenplay? Yeah, he was like I said, he was a little bit slick. Okay, all right, let's continue with the testimony.
Now, when was it that you learned that the something that was done to the computer, if ever, involved erasure?
When I saw the computer people at the house.
You mean Mr. Heyman?
Yes.
And how did seeing him there tell you that?
Well, he told me that the computer had been wiped, and that there was. I'm sure he said that the computer had been wiped, and I'm not sure what he said was there.
Okay.
I think he said nothing.
He said nothing was there?
Yeah.
Well, was he looking for something in particular? Do you know?
Yes, he was looking for anything under the files of Menendez will or list.
And when he said nothing was there, was he referring to the entire computer or to the files or what?
To the files. There was nothing under the files.
And ultimately, did you talk to your brother about this?
Yes.
And do you know how many days later it was that you talked to him about it?
It was either Sunday or the Monday after. I'm not sure. It was a few days later. I was trying to reach him all weekend.
Well, this would be as convenient a place as any other.
Okay, we'll recess until 1:30. Again, don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:30.
Thank you. Mr. Menendez, we were talking, I believe, about Craig Signorelli.
Yes.
Now, before September,
Does anybody else hear the every time they hear the name Signorelli, think of the Disney version of Cinderella when the mice are singing Cinderella, Cinderella? Is that just me? Am I the only one that did I already talk about it? I'm sure. I feel like I may have mentioned something like that. Let me know if you've heard me say this before. I don't remember, but I just in my brain I just heard Cinderella, Cinderella. Anyway, okay, sorry. Totally irrelevant.
September 1989, had Craig Signorelli ever been to your house in Beverly Hills?
Before September 1989, yes, once.
And do you remember when it was that he had been to the house in Beverly Hills before that?
I don't remember the exact date.
Was it in 1988, the year before?
I think it was in 1989. May have been 1988. I don't remember. It was.
Sorry for planting that in your heads to those who were not already thinking of it.
It was after the burglaries.
Well, you moved to Beverly Hills after the burglaries, correct?
Yes.
And you moved to Beverly Hills in October of 1988.
Yes.
And sometime after you moved there, did Craig Signorelli show up at your house in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
And was he with someone else?
As to that question, overruled.
Yes, he was with Steve Aimbinder.
And do you recall what time of day or night it was that Mr. Signorelli and Mr. Aimbinder showed up at your house?
I think it was sometime around 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Now, had there been some period of time before that day when you had not seen Mr. Signorelli at all?
Yes.
And do you know for how long a period of time?
I don't know how long the time it was because I don't remember exactly what time the incident was, but I hadn't seen him after September until that incident.
Had he been allowed at your home in Calabasas in the months before you moved?
No.
Now, with respect to the time he came to your house at night in Beverly Hills, what occurred?
He came to the house and with Steve, and I let him in. And the foyer was dark. The house was dark because it was late, I guess. I'm not sure why it was so dark. But anyway, I left in my dad's car, and Steve, Craig, and I went out.
Well, you left in your dad's car, and where were Steve and Craig?
I think Craig was sitting next to me, and Steve was in the seat right behind.
They were in the car with you?
Yes.
And you were planning to go out somewhere?
No, I just hadn't seen them in a while, so I was just was driving around.
Now, do you know if Ed Fenno was staying at your house then?
I don't remember.
Okay, what happened after you were out in your father's car with Mr. Signorelli and Mr. Aimbinder?
I got a phone call from my dad.
A phone call in the car?
Yeah, he had a car phone.
And not for the truth, Your Honor, but what did your father say?
He told me to get back home.
And what did you do?
I went back home.
And what happened when you got back home?
My dad came out of the house and told Craig that if he ever came near his property again, he'd kill him.
And what kind of tone of voice did your father use when he said that?
I thought he was going to kill him. I mean, if he ever came back, he was very angry, very upset. He hated Craig and was really telling Craig never to come back to this house.
My question was, what was his tone? Was he quiet? Was he low? Was he loud?
He was loud. He was very close to yelling.
And what did Craig do?
Craig left with Steve.
They both left.
Yeah, Craig had driven.
And where was your father when he was making this statement to Mr. Signorelli?
He was right near the fence in the Beverly Hills house. He was right near the Sallyport fence area. Craig was going back to his car on the street.
You mean the carport?
Yes.
Sallyport is something you go through in jail, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
So he was outside?
Yes.
And where was Mr. Signorelli?
He was outside as well.
And were there other people outside besides yourself? Mr. Signorelli, Mr. Aimbinder, and your father?
Yes.
Who else?
Lyle was there. My mother was there. If Ed was there, then Ed was there. If he was staying in the house at that time. I don't remember. No, I think that was it.
Did Lyle have a friend named Tracy?
Yeah, he
Was
did
she
have a
there
Tracy. That's
that
right.
night?
Tracy was there. Whoever was at the house at that time came out of the house when my dad came out.
Okay. And did Mr. Signorelli ever return to that house while your parents were alive?
No, he did not.
Now, I think you've testified that you first saw Craig after your parents died, after you came back from New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you said it was about a week after?
It was about a week after I got back from New Jersey.
Got back in order to attend to the will
Yes.
in the computer issue?
Yes.
Now, had you talked to him before you saw him?
Yes.
And do you know, you talked to him on the phone?
Yes.
Do you know if you told him about what had happened with the computer and the erasures and all that stuff before you saw him or only when you saw him in person?
Jeff, you called me this.
Overall,
I think only when I saw him in person. Before then, we were just on and off trying to get a hold of each other.
Well, had you talked to him?
Yes.
Okay, so you did get a hold of him.
Mhm.
Is that
Yes.
So how long did you talk to him before you saw him? On the phone. You said you did talk to him on the phone before you saw him.
Yeah, not very long. I would talk to him for a few minutes, and I said I was busy this day or that day. I don't really remember the conversations that well.
Okay. Do you remember what day of the week it was when you actually saw him?
No, I'm not sure. Maybe a Thursday or a Friday. I'm not really sure. It was about a week after I got back
And where did you see him?
at my house.
And how did you get there?
He drove.
How did you get there?
I was already there.
Now, were you staying at Casey Whalen's house when you got back from New Jersey?
Yes.
And did you stay there for some period of time?
Yes.
And during the day, when you were staying at Casey Whalen's house, what would you do?
I would usually go over to the Beverly Hills house.
And why would you do that?
I'm not really sure. I don't really remember.
Did you sleep at the Beverly Hills house?
No.
Were there security guards there during the day?
Yes.
At some point, Mr. Menendez, did your grandmother move out from New Jersey and take up residence in the house in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
And when she did that, did you live there with her for a while?
I stayed at the house a lot more with her there because I didn't want her to stay alone. So at some nights I slept there.
Had she come back yet, though, from New Jersey at this point in time?
I don't believe so.
Now, when Mr. Signorelli came by the Beverly Hills house, what did you do with him?
I talked to him.
And what did you talk about?
I talked about what happened with my parents.
And how did you do that?
I told him what had happened that night about me going to the movies and going to the Taste of LA and why I came back and what happened and what I saw when I got back.
And when you were telling him this, what you saw when you got back, what room of the house were you in?
I was in the den.
And when you were telling him what you saw, were you showing him anything?
I was showing him where my parents had died, and I was telling him what the room had looked like and how horrible of a scene it was.
And did you tell him anything else in the course of that explanation of what it looked like?
I told him that it looked like my mother was shot after she had died, and I told him it looked like. I told him what the room looked like, and then I told him what the police thought had happened.
And why did you tell him what the police thought had happened?
Because I knew that the police were wrong and what they were thinking happened, and I told him what I thought happened.
And what did you tell him you thought happened?
I told him that I didn't think that they were shot from the back doors. I thought that whoever shot them was somebody that they knew and came in through the front.
Let me ask you something. Who was saying that they were shot from the back doors?
My understanding was that the police had said that to the papers because that's what the papers were saying.
Did you read that in the paper?
Yes.
And you thought that the police had said that to the reporter?
Yes.
And the back doors what back doors was the paper referring to, if you know?
They said they were shot from the back, and the den had doors from behind it. It had doors in 3 different areas, from the back, from the side, and from the front.
You've seen photographs here in this trial of the French doors, the ones that had glass and blinds, wooden blinds on them?
Yes.
And were those doors behind the couch?
Yes.
And are those the doors that you thought the media was saying were used to enter?
Yes.
Now, you said you knew your parents weren't shot from the back.
Yes.
And so what did you tell Mr. Signorelli?
I told him that I thought they came from the foyer. And
They being whom?
the people that my parents knew. I didn't specify who as of
Okay.
yet.
Do you mean the people who shot them?
Yes.
Okay. So you were telling him you thought the people who shot your parents came through the doors from the foyer.
Yes.
And that, in fact, is where the people who shot your parents came from.
Yes.
And what else did you tell him?
I told them that I thought it was someone that they knew, and I told them that it could have even been me. And,
Now, okay.
and then
Did
I
you tell
told
him
them,
anything else?
and then I told them that it was me.
Now, Mr. Menendez, do you know why you told this to Mr. Signorelli?
Yes.
Why?
Because I was trying to tell, I was hoping for an okay response. I was hoping for him to say that, no, you couldn't have done it, or no, you're too good of a person to do it, or something like that.
Why?
Because I thought it was such a horrible thing. I wanted to see what he thought about it.
Did you want to see what he thought about it or what he thought about you?
What he thought about me.
What did you think about you at that time?
I didn't like myself very much.
And I mean, you can definitely tell that he's has a very low self-esteem at this point in time, because any of us watching Craig Signorelli knows that he is not someone that any of us would want to turn to for, his opinion on whether someone's a good person or a bad person, because like I said, so slick, so gross. So like the idea of that young man being an arbiter of like whether someone is good or bad, or whether a decision was moral or immoral, and just grosses me out. But Erik A couldn't read him that well. B had a low self-esteem, and this is just someone that he thought maybe could accept him or something like that.
Now, after you told him it could have been you, it was you, did you tell him something else?
Yes.
What'd you tell him?
I told him that it wasn't me.
So you told him every possible version of whether it was or wasn't you?
Yeah, depending on the reaction I got from him. And when he said that he didn't believe it was me, I said, "You're right, it wasn't me."
But Erik also is a good example of the fact that oftentimes when people keep secrets, especially really bad secrets, there's like a subconscious need to talk about it. There's a subconscious need to tell someone about it, because it's just a lot to be carrying on their shoulders. So it's like Erik clearly was looking for someone to confess to. Dr. Oziel, Craig Signorelli, these are literally the worst people to be to be confessing to. But I don't know. It just goes to show that he did not have the best people around him, maybe, or he didn't really have a great compass for the kind of people that he had around him. I don't know, but it's very, very interesting to watch this, through kind of a psychological perspective.
Now, you heard Mr. Signorelli testify here to certain facts that he claims you told him in the course of telling him that it might have been you or that it was you.
Yes.
Was he truthful in testifying to those facts?
No.
For example, did you tell him that you walked outside and your brother was standing there holding 2 shotguns and said simply, "Let's do it"?
No, I never told him that.
Did you tell him you walked into the den and with no prior discussion at all, your brother says to you, "Shoot Mom," and you shot Mom?
No.
Now, did you have one discussion with Mr. Signorelli about what you had seen that night and the shooting of your parents, or did you have more than one?
I had one.
And did he stay over your house the night that you had this discussion?
No.
Now, when you were telling him what the room looked like where your parents were killed and what might have happened, how were you feeling?
I was feeling very, very sad. I was just remembering the scene.
And did Mr. Signorelli ever ask you any questions about what you had told him that day? Let me strike that question. Did he on that day ask you any questions at all about what you had told him, either about the way the room looked or how you were telling him it happened or anything like that?
No, he didn't say anything.
Now, did you at that time tell him about Lyle coming back and doing something to the computer?
Yeah, I told him all about the computer incident.
Okay. And did you indicate to him how you felt about what Lyle had done?
Yes.
And what did you tell him about how you felt about what Lyle had done?
Objection, hearsay.
It's not being offered for the truth, Your Honor.
What is it being offered for?
State of mind.
It'll be received for that purpose only.
Thank you, Your Honor.
How I felt about I told him that I was very upset with my brother.
And did you tell him why you were upset with your brother?
Yes.
And what did you say?
I said I was upset with my brother because he had wiped the computer before really finding out if there was any personal things from my mother.
Now, did you describe to Mr. Signorelli what some potential will that might have been in the computer might have contained?
No.
Did you have any reason whatsoever to believe that there was a will in the computer?
No, at that point, I definitely didn't think there was.
Did you see Mr. Signorelli again after that time that he was at your house?
I think so.
Did he ever stay at your house after your parents died?
No, he never slept over at my house.
Now, Mr. Menendez, do you have an independent recollection of your own as to what day it was that you came back from New Jersey to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, what day was it?
It was the day that the computer people came to the house.
Okay. Do you have an independent recollection of the date?
No.
Now, you have made reference to the burglaries. I want to read to you part of the stipulation that Mr. Kuriyama and I agreed to concerning that, okay?
Okay.
If I might, Your Honor. Regarding the Calabasas thefts, that between July 1st, 1988 and July 10th, 1988, Erik Menendez and a friend were at the home of another friend, John List Jr., whose parents were away on vacation. While searching for keys to a van, Erik and his friend found a piece of paper bearing a combination to the List family safe. Do you have that in mind, that stipulation?
I know of the stipulation.
Okay. Who was the friend that was with you at the List house?
Craig Signorelli.
And what was the reason, as far as you understood it, why your father hated Craig Signorelli?
Because Craig was involved with that with me.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, let me see counsel sidebar. Yeah,
This is the
we're
end
just
of the
going to
direct
take a
examination.
short break so that we can clear the
We're
center
getting into
section of the courtroom and get the
cross-examination
other jury in,
now.
and then we'll start up with the cross-examination. So let's give it, let's make this our break for the day because I've indicated to counsel, one of them has a need to leave at 4, so we'll break at 4 o'clock. So what we'll do is we'll start up around 2:30 and then go on until 4. So we'll take our afternoon break at this time. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 2:30.
Mr. Menendez, the first question asked by Mrs. Abramson was, where have you been living for the last 3.5 years? Isn't that right?
Yes, it was.
And you've been in the men's central jail?
Yeah, the LA County Jail.
Now, you and your brother killed your parents over 4 years ago, correct?
Yeah, over 4 years ago.
On August 20th, 1989, you and your brother, as your brother testified, burst into the family room of your Beverly Hills mansion. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, you surprised your parents while they were watching television and blasted them until your pump shotguns were emptied of ammunition, correct?
Objection. Ms. Stacy Everett.
Overall.
No, sir.
Did you burst into the family room?
Yes.
So notice what happened there. I think Erik already was going to give the answer that he just gave, but that objection that Leslie just gave is, saying, objection misstates the testimony, blah, 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 or misstates the evidence. And the reason for that is, I think, is the issue with the word surprise, that they surprised their parents. Now, when Kuriyama asked that last question, it was a very long question. There were a lot of details, a lot of points along the way that a witness could disagree with. So, and the witness is only supposed to give yes or no answers, right? It's a little bit like playing a game of guess who. Where one person is supposed to ask about, is the person that you're looking at, are they wearing glasses or are they wearing a hat? Yes or no. You can't give any descriptions of that. You can only say yes or no. Cross-examination is supposed to be this similar, unless the question sort of requires a bit more explanation in order to properly answer it. So that's why on cross-examination, usually, at least in my opinion, for most people, sometimes when you have a very skilled attorney, they have the ability to do a lot more. But the simplest way to do a cross-examination would be to ask very simple questions, simple yes or no questions that you are just leading the witness like a dog on a leash, so that they are just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then sometimes, you can lull them into a bit of a rhythm, at which point you can get them into a gotcha question. So this last question here, where he's, describes this whole thing of, grand description of how they burst in and surprised their parents and blah, 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 blah. Like I said, there are a lot of points along the way in which a witness can disagree, in which case the answer is, I don't agree with what you just said. But just in case Erik didn't nail that answer, Leslie comes in with the objection misstates the misstates or mischaracterizes the evidence, et cetera, et cetera. She's also flagging, if Erik is paying attention and he's listening to what she's saying, then although her objection has been overruled, a witness who's actually listening to the attorney that is objecting can also understand that, to say, that's right. It gives them a moment to reflect on the question and then to answer, with a little bit of a hint from their own attorney. This is just some strategy that can kind of help during any trial, which of course is a high pressure, tense situation for any witness on the stand, most of all a criminal defendant.
Yes, we burst into the family room, but they weren't watching TV.
What were they doing?
They were standing when I saw them. They weren't watching TV.
Both of your parents were standing?
Yes.
Where were they standing?
Behind the coffee table in front of the couch.
Did you see them rising to their feet?
No, I couldn't see well in the room, but I never saw them rising.
Who was on the right and who was on the left?
Facing them,
yes.
My dad was on the right, past the coffee table, and my mom was on the left.
Now, in direct examination, you've been saying that you saw two figures, correct?
Yes.
You knew it was your mother and father, isn't that right?
I knew it was my mother and father. I couldn't see their faces. I couldn't see exactly who they were until after they were dead, but I knew that it was them.
Was the television set on?
Yes.
Was there a light coming from the television set?
Yes.
So you saw who you were shooting?
Well, I knew it was my parents.
And in particular, you knew you were shooting at your mother?
I don't even remember. I don't think so.
You don't think that you knew you were shooting at your mother?
When I was shooting, I wasn't thinking at who I was shooting at.
Where did you aim your gun?
Just right in front of me as soon as I walked in the room. And I wasn't thinking this person's here, this person's there. Whoever was in the room, wherever they were, I was shooting at.
Were you closing your eyes when you were shooting?
No.
You were looking at what you were shooting at?
I suppose.
Now, you've testified here that as a youngster, you walked in your sleep. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I did many times.
Are you telling these juries that you were sleepwalking when you shot your parents?
No, I was awake. It's just
That's
that
a dumb question.
as soon as I went into the room.
It's a dumb question, and it just looks like he's trying to make him look ridiculous, but obviously he's not going to answer, "Oh yeah, I want the jury to think that I was sleepwalking." I dislike this kind of strategy personally. It meh.
The gun went off, and there was fire, there was smoke, and I didn't. It was so chaotic that I just didn't. I don't have a great memory of it.
Now, you entered the room first, correct?
Yes.
Now, you say the gun went off. Did you fire that gun?
No, I fired the gun.
Now, you shot until your gun was no longer loaded,
I
correct?
shot everything I had.
And then what did you hear or see after you had finished firing all of your ammunition?
I heard a noise coming from what was my mom.
Now, you've described noises in direct examination. Did you describe for these jurors the noise that you heard coming from your mother?
I don't even remember what the noise was. I know that I heard it because I ran out of the room just to get away from there. But I can't even tell you what it was.
Did you describe to Dr. Oziel that it was moaning coming from your mother as she was trying to crawl?
No, I never said that. I read that in his notes. I did tell him she was trying to crawl. I found that out from my brother afterwards when I talked about it. But I didn't see anyone crawling in that room.
Would you describe for the jury what sound you heard? How would you characterize that sound?
Overall.
I guess I would characterize it as a moaning simply because she was dying, and that's what freaked me out, and I just wanted to get away. But I can't remember how it was or the way it was.
Was your mother crying?
No, it wasn't a crying sound.
You indicated that your father said no as you entered and started to shoot.
Yes.
Did your mother ever say anything?
No, she never said a word.
She didn't have a chance to say anything?
I guess not.
Now, you said that you were freaked out when you heard this noise, this moan from your mother.
Yes.
Is that right? And you're so freaked out that you went to your car and you had the ammunition box and you're pulling out ammunition so that when your brother came, you handed him ammunition. Isn't that right?
No, that's not why I ran to the car. As soon as that happened, I just got out of there and I just ran, and I ran out toward the car. And as soon as Lyle got there, then we started scrambling for shells.
As soon as Lyle got there, didn't he testify that you handed him a cartridge?
I did.
So you had been in the car and you're pulling out ammunition when you got to the car. You got to the car first, correct?
We got there basically the same time.
So you went directly for the ammunition, didn't you?
No, that's not what I was thinking. As soon as I ran out of the room, I just ran, and I can't answer your question. I can't answer the thoughts that were going through my mind at that time.
Where was the ammunition located in your car?
The ammunition was in the trunk of the car.
The trunk.
Yes.
So you went to the trunk of the car and opened up the trunk.
No, the trunk was already open.
You had left it open?
Yes.
And you went to the back of the car and you went to get the ammunition and you handed the ammunition to your brother.
At that point, I definitely was scrambling around for shells and handing it to my brother.
Why?
Because I knew that he was going to go back in the room.
You left the room first, correct?
I guess so, yes.
And you took your gun with you.
Yes.
How would you know that your brother would return to put the coup de grace into your mother?
Rephrase the question.
I didn't know what my brother would...
Rephrase the question.
How did you know as you ran out of that room after you heard your mother moan and apparently try to crawl, how did you know that Lyle, your brother, would return to finish killing her off?
Overall.
I didn't see her crawling. When I left that room, I just wanted to get out of there, and I ran outside. And when Lyle came, that's when we went to the back of the car. And at that point, I knew what was going to happen.
Without any words spoken, you knew that your brother...
There were no words spoken.
There were no words spoken.
No.
And you were in there, in the trunk of your car, getting the ammunition already, correct?
Already when?
Before Lyle arrived at your car.
I don't I don't think so. I don't think so.
So you were standing there doing what?
Lyle was right behind me. It wasn't as if I stood at the car and then he showed up. He was right there. And at that point, we just went to the back of the car and I knew what was going to happen.
You just instinctively knew that your brother would return to finish killing your mother?
Yes.
And so you went into the trunk first and pulled out the ammunition
Yes.
and handed how many rounds to your brother?
1.
Why only one?
I think because as soon as I handed him, I was scrambling. The shells and everything was all over the place. And as soon as I picked one, I gave it to my brother and he just ran in. I guess if he would have stood there and asked for more, I would have given him more. I don't remember the feelings that I was feeling right then.
So after you handed him one cartridge, were you searching for others?
I don't think so. He just started running in.
And did you then follow him?
Not at first, but I soon followed him.
And you heard the final shot?
Yes.
And you were at the door of the den at that point?
I was coming toward the den. I didn't want to go into the den.
Did you look inside the room?
I don't remember.
You don't recall that?
I don't recall that. I remember hearing the shot. I remember being in the foyer. I don't recall seeing into the den.
After you heard the shot, what did you see or hear?
Lyle coming out of the den.
Did he have his rifle, his shotgun with him?
No.
Now, you've heard the coroner describe 10 areas of wounds to your mother and 6 to your father, correct?
Yes.
Now, you and your brother were deadly accurate with your shotguns that night, weren't you, for not being able to see very well?
Objection, your results.
Overall.
I have no idea.
Did you see your mother move at all after you started to shoot at her?
I didn't see anything after that.
You saw nothing?
I saw nothing. I saw the fire of my gun and this stuff coming out of it, and I did not see anything. I mean, I guess that's why shots just went all over the place, out the window, on the side. I just didn't know what was happening. I didn't know where I was firing or I really wasn't aware.
Mr. Menendez, there were only 2 shots that missed.
Yeah, culperistic. I was thinking the same thing. It doesn't take that much to be accurate in that way with shotguns at the range we were talking about, right? I mean, because normally when it's impressive to be accurate with a shotgun when we're talking about like moving clay pigeons that are being shot through the sky, right? Like, and that is going to be at quite a distance away. But in this situation where it's like they're like 5 or 10 feet in front of them, like it's really not hard to be a good shot with something like this at this particular distance. You can almost close your eyes and hit what you're intending to hit. Debbie Faison Cook wants to know, are both juries in the courtroom for this? Yes, I believe so. All right. Continuing on.
You heard the testimony about the 2 panes being broken? The French doors behind where your mother and father were seated?
Yes.
So there are 2 misses out of all the shots that you and your brother fired.
Apparently.
Yeah, phrase it as a question, please. It is a question.
Is it your understanding that there are only 2 misses?
Apparently.
I'm going to object to the point because we haven't seen stats.
And also making law simple. Good to see you. I want to see their conviction set aside so we can have a new trial. I would be so fascinated to see this case retried from start to finish with today's today's concepts, because there are so many things that I think muddied up this case in 1993 that was just a product of American culture at the time. The idea of abuse, the idea of child abuse, the idea of SA on children by their own parents, the idea of homosexuality, like these kinds of things that came up in this trial that we have just definitely sort of, I think overall our culture has decided different things about it, and we don't have the same sort of I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Um Sort of stigmas and things like that, misunderstandings, I guess, around a lot of these subjects that came up in this trial. That I really think that it would have a different outcome if tried today. Um, uh, Janice Arbogast, yes, no, I agree. What I'm saying is, in 1993, there were all kinds of misunderstandings that were going on around this trial. So, okay. All right. Let's continue on.
Were your parents disabled after the initial shots? That were they stationary targets for you?
Objection to the question. Dave.
I have no idea. I just started firing as soon as I came into that room, and whoever was in that room, I was going to fire at. And I didn't think this is who this is or who this is, who this is. And I just started firing, and apparently I was mostly shooting at my mom. I didn't know. I wasn't aware. I wasn't thinking about it. All I was thinking is, I got to fire every shot with my gun.
You weren't arrested for your crimes for nearly 7 months, were you?
Yeah, I guess it was that much amount of time.
You and your brother nearly got away with it, didn't you?
No, I didn't think we'd get away with it from the second it was done. I thought we'd be arrested that night. I was actually surprised.
You never turned yourself in the 7 months that you were free on the streets, knowing that you had killed your parents, correct?
No, I never turned myself in.
In fact, you conspired with your brother to lie at every bend and turn, to the police, to your relatives, to newspaper people, to everybody, correct?
Object before the question.
Rephrase the question, please.
You conspired with your brother, did you not, to lie to people about your involvement in the killings of your parents?
Object before the question.
Overruled.
No, it was very clear that we wanted to lie to the police because at that point that night we didn't want to get arrested, and so we were scrambling around to find a reasonable enough explanation of where we could have been. But after that, we never talked about it. We never talked about what we'd say to my relatives or to anyone else.
So after the first day, you conspired to lie to the police.
Of that word.
Overruled.
What be easier? What do you mean by conspired?
You talked to your
So good on Erik to ask for clarification about what he means by that, because I almost would have thought this is Kuriyama being argumentative. This courtroom has been super sensitive about the attorneys being argumentative with the witness on the stand, like overly sensitive, in my opinion. And I feel like on the basis that they have that the judge has allowed or that has granted an objection based on the attorney being argumentative, his sensitivity level is pretty high. I feel like this meets his sensitivity level. I don't know. I don't like it.
to your brother, you agreed that you and he would lie to the police.
Yes.
And after that, did you have any other discussions about lying to anybody about what you did?
No, we didn't. We didn't discuss it. I mean, he just, I guess, assumed that I would not tell anyone that I did this.
After that, it came naturally.
No, it didn't come naturally at all. I tried to tell Craig. I told Dr. Oziel. I tried to tell another cousin of mine. It actually was very difficult around my relatives. But to anyone else, I certainly wasn't going to tell.
You lied to your relatives, correct?
In a sense, I did.
And I believe your brother testified that two nasty men from the LA Times came to interview you and your brother at the Calabasas house. Isn't that correct?
They weren't nasty. They got nasty during the interview because they thought we had done it. And we were trying to say we hadn't done it until they got nasty. But I don't know if they were nasty people.
Now, when you say they got nasty because they thought you did it?
They had some misinformation. And I was denying the misinformation, but I knew what they were getting at. And so they were beginning to get angry.
Now,
Your Honor, at this point, I'd like to report.
No, let's move on to something else.
Mr. Menendez, you testified that you thought your parents couldn't die and they looked like wax figures after you and your brother shot them, correct?
Yes.
Now, despite the auditory problems that you claim to have, you understand now that your mother and father are in fact dead and could never go out into the sunshine again. Do you understand that?
That is so argumentative. Despite the auditory problems that you claim to have, you agree that they're actually dead? Like, what does that have to do with him having auditory problems? That's what I mean by this to me seems like an argumentative question. So I paused it like while Leslie was seeming to object. So I wonder what the objection is going to be, and is the judge actually going to grant it? Let's see. Overruled.
Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, I'm very clear.
Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. I mean,
About that.
Now, you have testified that since being in jail, you have only been in the sunshine 10 times. Isn't that right?
I'm not clear on the number.
sorry, something got knocked over. Little bit of chaos. Hey, chill. Go back. Jump up. Indy. Up. Indy, go. Pardon the interruption. We'll continue.
About 10 times, very few times.
And you testified to that on direct examination, correct?
Yes.
Did you want the juries to feel sorry for you that you couldn't go out into the sunshine?
No, not at all.
Now, you and your brother have made many statements about how bad your parents were. That'd be fair to say?
I would
Overall.
I would say I said a lot of things that happened to me and how I felt about them.
Now, because you and your brother killed them, they're not around to tell their side of the story, are they?
No.
Now, do you remember the testimony of your brother? He testified that he would lie for you. Do you recall that testimony?
Objection, on misstates the testimony.
Reporter's transcript, 14,827, line 5.
Read it.
Very well, Ewan. This is volume 90, Tuesday, September 21st. Would you lie for your brother? I don't have to lie for him here. But did you lie in the past? I would lie for him. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I believe he would.
Okay. Would you lie for your brother?
I lied for him many times in my life. My
Would you-
parents were the type of people that if you didn't lie, I could get him punished, and I
Would you
wasn't.
lie to help yourself?
I did a lot with my parents.
You did a lot of lying.
With my parents, I did a lot of lying.
You did a lot of lying with some other people too, didn't you?
With the police and people, yes.
And Mr. Menendez, you wanted to be an actor, didn't you?
No, not really. I wanted to be a tennis player.
Do you recall making a statement on November 29th, 1989, in which you stated that you wanted to be an actor? And that you told Craig Signorelli that once you got into acting, you'd bring him into acting as well?
If you let me see what I said, I could definitely tell you what I said.
First of all, do you recall making that statement?
I don't recall making the statement.
Or is it your testimony that you didn't want to be an actor?
I enjoyed acting, but
Okay.
that's not what I wanted to do.
In fact, you gave a performance to your high school class. You gave a soliloquy from Richard II, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you gave it to the entire class?
Yeah, I was going to do it in just my drama class until my English teacher found out about it, and she wanted me to do it in front of the entire class.
You enjoyed that, didn't you?
Not really. That was pretty embarrassing because it was just an embarrassing thing. But it was I enjoyed drama class.
Did you cry in that?
No,
Now, you took a year of drama classes at Beverly Hills High School, correct?
yes,
And did you win any awards or any recognition for your acting ability?
definitely not.
Okay. Now, you were also an aspiring screenwriter, weren't you?
So this is all like, all right. So Erik, you're a fantastic performing arts actor. You were on stage in your high school play, and you got an award for it in high school. Therefore, you're this supreme Oscar-winning actor, and you are most definitely lying on the stand, isn't it? Isn't that true? Like, that's ridiculous. Especially, I mean, like, especially after having seen actual actors testifying in trials. Like, it's just it's like, now the idea that, like, this could all be an act by Erik, like he could be this like amazing supreme actor, is just like, it's just so silly. It's so silly and it's so stupid, having seen actual, like, high well a high performing actor testify in a trial, recently. It's just like, come on, man. I mean, maybe he could be an Aquaman. Like, maybe he could. I don't know, but like, Jesus, like, it's just so ridiculous to be. I mean, but maybe in 1993 they didn't have high profile trials where everybody could see an actor actually testify and see what that actually looks like.
I like to write, and my dad was in that industry, and it seemed like an easy.
Okay, sorry. Fair point. Love Dreaming PhD. Yeah, multiple actors now. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about Gwyneth Paltrow, and she's the one that's Oscar winning, Oscar winning, Oscar award. Anyway, you know what I mean. Academy Award winning. She has actually literally won an Oscar, and when she testified, we could tell if she was bullshitting us or not. Anyway.
Easy in, so I did, yes.
You're creative and clever in your writing. Would you agree with that?
That's not what they said, but
What do you think?
I thought I was.
Okay. Now, you ended up with a high enough GPA from high school, and you did well enough on the SAT to get into UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and UC San Diego?
I got into all the UC schools. It may have been more than that, but it wasn't because of my GPA.
You take into consideration your SAT as well?
Your SAT, definitely my tennis, and the fact that I put down that I wanted to do my major was like some very low major that would help you get into the school. And of course, my father.
It's kind of wild that he doesn't even remember what major he was going to have in school, because, like, this is 4 years later, of course, but I mean, it just speaks to the fact that he wasn't the one making that decision. That was someone else's preference, someone else's decision. Also, I caught this question, Matthew Newton, why doesn't the judge put an end to this crap, about the whole acting thing? The attorneys are allowed to make the arguments that they want to make to put their case on. They're allowed to, even if it's a stupid argument. and those of us, I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, it's a very stupid argument. They're allowed to make it. So he's allowed to go in and ask all these questions about, Erik being this star performer in high school. No offense to anyone who was a star performer in high school. Absolutely. You can have a very talented high schooler. You can have a very talented child actor, of course. But, the logical reasoning that, because you were a good actor, you're considered good in your acting class in high school, therefore, like, you're 100% lying on the you're like, we can all say that you're absolutely acting on the stage. To me, it's a dumb argument, but he has a right to make it. Okay.
Now, you referred to, was that an essay that accompanied your application to the University of California campuses?
I don't understand. There was an essay you had to write. I didn't write it, but you had to write one.
You said that you had indicated that you wanted to take a certain course. Is that correct? To get into schools? You're interested?
No, you had to put down what major you want, whether you want to be an economics major or a math major, and I put down like basket weaving. I put down the lowest, something to do with really minimal stuff this is what my parents figured, that if I put down that I was Hispanic and that I wanted this major, with my dad's connections, it would really help me out.
Now, the major you put down was basket weaving. Is that what you said?
I don't remember the major I put down. I think it had to do with. I don't remember. I didn't fill out the form, so I don't know.
Could it have been undeclared?
It may have been undeclared. I don't know. I thought it was. I remember having a discussion with my mother that she wanted to put down the major that would best help me get into the school, since a lot of kids wanted to put down the real majors, history and so on, and she didn't want me to be competing with them.
Mr. Menendez, there's been talk or testimony in front of both juries about you having learning disabilities.
Yes.
Is that right? You got into all these UC campuses. You're a pretty smart fellow, aren't you?
That's not what I was told most of my life.
What do you think? Let's go to your state of mind, since we've been talking about that for a long time.
I'd always like to think of myself as smart. I always wanted to think of myself as smart, but I just never was able to achieve in that way.
Is it your understanding that you must put your parents on trial in order to get the focus off of yourself and your brother in this case? Now, defense witnesses have characterized your mother as a bad housekeeper, and that she took you and your brother late to school and practice. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And is that the way that you would characterize your mother? She was a messy housekeeper?
She had a lot of things on her mind, and she was in a lot of different places, sometimes not all there. And she had a really rough life, and she wasn't able to keep the house very well, and she was always in a hurry. It's just the way she was.
Now, you and your brother lived at the house as well, correct?
Yes.
Now, there's a photograph on that board up there. It's of your room. Does it show a messy room?
Yes, definitely very messy.
And your brother has testified that your car was very messy. It had dirty clothes in it, sort of thing.
It was the second room for me, basically.
And Mr. Menendez, as to being late, your brother testified that, for example, he didn't like swimming, so he would intentionally try to delay your mother so that he wouldn't have to go by either taking his time or acting like he was sick or feigning some kind of an injury so that you would often be late. Isn't that right?
Lyle would do that?
Yes.
Oh, I did the same thing.
Right.
I guess he did it too. Yeah.
Okay. So you did the same thing, yet defense witnesses come in and blame it all on your mother for taking you late to places. Correct?
No, we were late to school, and for tennis mostly. For swimming, I guess we were late too. I assume we were, but I don't really remember being.
Would it be fair to say that you and your brother contributed to the messiness of the house?
Well, we live there.
And would you say that it would be fair to say that you and your brother caused your mother to take you late to school and to other activities?
No,
you
that
didn't
wouldn't
necessarily
be true.
want to go?
The former would be true about the messy house, but I hated being late. I could not stand walking into a classroom and having 15 heads turn to see who was coming in 10 minutes late, or walking onto the tennis court that way. So I hated that. But
Yeah, you testified that you would stall, so that would delay your mother.
I would stall for swimming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, remember the defense testimony of Mrs. Herx, that she said she saw your mother on August 1st, 1989, and she said that your mother said she was going to Quito, Peru to visit her relatives. Do you remember that testimony, sir?
Yeah.
And do you remember Mrs. Herx testified that she herself was born in Argentina and had heard of Quito, Peru before she said your mother told her that on this August 1st of 1989? Do you remember that testimony?
Yeah, I remember that
Okay,
testimony.
now you've testified, and we now know that in fact you had a national tournament in Kalamazoo, Michigan, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that you went early in August with your mother to Kalamazoo. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's true. But I found out later she also told other people that she was going to Quito, Peru. I'm not quite sure what's in Quito, Peru, but I don't know why she was saying that she was going to Quito, Peru.
Now, you in fact went to Kalamazoo, correct?
Yeah, we were headed to Kalamazoo August
And
3rd.
the relatives that she was supposed to visit in Quito, Peru, she didn't have any relatives in Quito, Peru, did she?
No, she did
In
not.
fact, she had relatives near Kalamazoo. Isn't that right?
No, she did not.
She had relatives in Oaklawn, Illinois. Isn't that right?
In Chicago, yes.
Chicago,
Mhm.
which is how far? It's just southwest of Kalamazoo, isn't it?
I'm not sure. We would fly to Chicago, and then my Uncle Brian had a plane. He had one of those private planes, and he would fly us there. I think it was 100, 200 miles. I'm not even sure. Maybe may have been much more. I mean, it was in the same vicinity, the northwest.
So, and she in fact had relatives near Kalamazoo. In fact, you would go to see them in Chicago, and your uncle would fly you up to Kalamazoo.
Yes.
Correct? Remember the testimony of your cousin Diane Vandermolen?
So is Kuriyama's argument that Kitty mistook Kalamazoo for Quito, Peru because Quito, Peru rhymes with Kalamazoo? Like, I don't understand how anyone would confuse those two. Geographically or even linguistically, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Does not. Anyway, I don't follow that argument. It's very strange.
When she was staying at your house, one of the many cousins that stayed at your house during the summers. And when you were, and this is in 1982, 1983, when you were 13 and your brother was 15, that Diane Vandermolen testified that she heard your mother say, "I've got to go help Lyle wash his hair." Do you remember that?
I heard that. Yes.
Now, your mother told Diane Vandermolen that, correct?
Apparently, wasn't in the house.
Well, your mother wasn't trying to hide that fact that she was trying to help your brother wash his hair. Would that be fair to say?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Objection sustained. The answer is strict.
Now, Mr. Menendez, your brother has testified that he started to lose his hair in his early teens. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
About the time that your mother was helping him to wash his hair? Is that right?
Well, if Diane was there, I was 11 and 12, so Lyle was 14 and 15.
Excuse me, objection, this calls for speculation.
Overruled.
So your brother Lyle was about 14 or 15 during this period of time that Diane Vandermolen was there.
Yes.
Now, you heard your brother testify that your mother and father were concerned about his hair loss, correct?
I heard him testify about that, yes.
Okay. And your father was concerned about the hair loss as well, isn't that correct?
What Lyle said is that he
I'm
wanted.
going to object, Your Honor. I'm not sure what the question is for personal knowledge or.
Rephrase the question.
Yes. Do you recall sitting in this courtroom and hearing your brother testify that your father was concerned about his hair loss and talks about getting with?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the form of the question because it's irrelevant.
Well, it's still not asking about his personal knowledge at the time. I mean, unless I guess he's asking for his personal knowledge now that he's heard it in the courtroom, but I don't see how, anyway.
Overruled.
Mr. Menendez, did you and your brother discuss taking your mother's, assisting Lyle because of his hair loss, and turning it into innuendo about your mother molesting him in this bathtub. You discussed that at all?
I don't understand what my mom molesting Lyle has to do with his hair loss.
Were you here when your brother testified that your mother would come in when he was taking a bath and molest him?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this supposedly started to occur. This supposedly occurred based on what Diane Vandermolen had heard your mother say, that she was going to go help your brother wash his hair.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Was there any discussion between you and your brother that you would try to act like your mother was molesting your brother in the bathtub during this period of time?
No.
When Diane was there?
Yes.
No, definitely not. I didn't even know my mother was doing that.
After you were arrested.
See, like this whole line of questioning to me is, I mean, other than asking him, did you guys talk about this kind of thing? But you know that the answer is going to be no. I don't understand why he thinks this is like fruitful territory for him to get into, Kuriyama, for him to get into, because clearly Erik had no knowledge of this. He had no idea that any of it was happening. He didn't even know the allegation of it was happening until much later when he was an adult. So asking about what Diane, Vandermolen was told by Kitty, or, what Lyle said he experienced, asking Erik about these things, it's so unrelated. It's to me is very loose on the relevance.
On the charges presently pending against you.
Yes.
Did you discuss certain things that occurred in your childhood and say, well, we can use that and say, Mom molested us here? And do you follow what I'm saying?
No, after we were arrested, we had many discussions about the stuff that happened between Dad and I, and whether or not we were actually going to bring that out. But definitely not about Mom in the bathtub with Lyle. No.
Now, do you recall testimony of Detective Zoller that no family letters or personal effects of your parents were taken from the Beverly Hills house? Is that correct?
Detective Zoller didn't take any?
Right.
No.
Overall.
Then, Mr. Menendez, you and your brother had access to all the family photographs that were accumulated over nearly 2 decades of your family.
No, I'm going to object to this answer.
Overall.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we had access to everything before and after they died.
You've indicated that you wanted to get everything your mother ever wrote and collect those so you could see what she thought.
No, I never indicated that.
Did you testify to that just this morning?
No, what I was saying is that I thought she had something in the computer, and I desperately wanted to find out what was in the computer because of how sad I felt afterwards. I just wanted to know what was really going on with her, since I didn't understand her anymore.
Now, besides the computer, were there other writings belonging to your mother or generated by your mother?
I didn't know that, but I found that out later.
Did you know that your mother had a diary?
Yes.
How did you know that?
I found that diary.
Now, in fact, it was in your bedroom after the killings. Correct?
Yes.
And you read that diary.
Yes, I did.
Do you know where it is? That diary is now?
I have no idea. I assume my grandmother has it. Was right after my grandmother came in, and she sort of took over and took possession of everything and sorted it out. And I tried to do some of it with her, but I didn't do that much with her.
Now, this diary of your mother, did it cover the last year of her life? Approximately.
Actually, what the diary was, it was in a diary type of thing, but it was just a letter. It was in a little booklet, but it was just a letter from my mother to my father. It was a very sad letter.
Where is that?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overall.
I have no idea where it is.
Now, this diary, let's get back to the diary for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see a diary that your mother wrote expressing her love for you and your brother that was comprised of about 50 to 75 pages?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Overall.
No, I definitely never saw a diary like that. When I was in 1986, I saw a suicide letter from my mother to my father, in which she said that she loved us. That made me call Lyle and ask Lyle to please talk to Mom, because I didn't want her to kill herself. But I never saw a diary 50 to 70 pages.
Now, if there were a diary in your room several days after the killings,
Of 50 to 70 pages?
yes, how would that diary have gotten there, if you know?
Objection
It
calls for speculation.
would have
Sustained.
Now, this diary that you testified you saw
Mhm.
after the killings, how many pages long was that?
It was a long letter. I'd say about 10, maybe 15 pages. It was a small book about this one. It had a rainbow and a unicorn on the front, and a little gold luck. And I always wanted to know where it was, but it had disappeared from my bedroom, so I didn't know where it was.
This diary disappeared from your bedroom?
Yeah, once my grandmother came into the house, she pretty much took most of the stuff.
When was it that you first saw the diary that you just testified about?
After my parents died.
How long after?
I think before I went back to New Jersey for the funeral, so within the first week.
You left for New Jersey either the 25th or the 26th of August, is that right?
Is the 26th Saturday?
I
Yeah,
believe so.
I left on Saturday.
So before the 26th, you had found this diary of your mother's, correct?
Yes, I had gone into my mother's room when all my relatives were there. Everyone was in the house. I had been in my dad's room and my mom's side and found the diary.
Okay, what day was that, if you recall?
I assume it was before I left to New Jersey, so Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, somewhere
Okay,
around.
well, Thursday, the 24th is the day that you bought the money clip and the Rolex. So let's take it from there. Was it before that or after that?
It might have been before. I really don't have a great recollection of what happened in the aftermath. I remember I was at the Bel Air Hotel, and I remember that there were a lot of relatives and that we were at the house, and a lot of things happened, but I don't remember an exact sequence.
You testified, though, that you found this diary, and did you bring it to your room so you could
I found it, and I was crying because it was so sad, and I brought it to my room and just started reading it. It wasn't really a diary. It said "Dear Jose" at the top, and so it wasn't a diary, but it was in a diary type of book.
And did it talk about you and your brother and how much your mother loved you and your brother
No, it didn't mention Lyle and I in that one.
at all?
Not at all.
So if there were such a diary, that wouldn't be the one that you saw.
Objection calls for
I don't know what diary you're.
Objection sustained. The answer is correct.
Mr. Menendez, was there any other diaries that you saw besides the one that you've described as 10-page long diary with the rainbow on the front of it?
Was there any other diary? No,
Yes.
not that I saw. I'm sure she had tons of diaries. She probably had my diaries too. I didn't see them.
Now, if she had your diaries too, would those diaries have been in the house when she was killed?
Unless she destroyed them, yes.
Did you ever find those?
No, I didn't. I went into my father's room partly because I knew there were a lot of magazines and videos that I didn't want anyone to find. And I went into my mother's room just in case there was. Actually, what started me going into my mother's room was I found a tape recorder.
Okay, wait a minute. You talked about magazines and videos that you didn't want anyone to find
Yes.
of yours?
No, they were in my father's room. They were in a box, and they had a lot of magazines.
These were the nudie mags that were, I think, some female and some male as well, which was, so this question right here about like, these were yours. It kind of, it pokes into this question about Erik's, sexuality here that unfortunately comes up in this trial.
magazines, gay magazines and gay pornos, and I removed them from the room because I knew the relatives were going to be around and I thought they might be in there.
What did you do with those?
I put them in my closet.
Oh, so if they were found in your closet, you would have taken it from your dad's room and put it in your closet.
They weren't found in my closet. I gave them to my cousin Henry and to my cousin Andy, and told them to get rid of them. I didn't want my grandmother to find them. I didn't want my relatives to find them. I didn't want anyone to find them.
Mr. Menendez, have you had homosexual relations with anyone other than, as you've indicated, your brother?
Objection, Your Honor, to the formal question. Objection to the subject matter can ask.
Okay. Mr. Menendez, would it be fair to say that you've had access to hundreds of photographs of you and your brother and your parents taken of your family over 2 decades?
Objection, Vegas.
As to when did he have access? Why don't you rephrase the question?
Yes. After the killings of your parents, did you have access to hundreds of family photographs?
After or before we were arrested?
Yes.
Yes.
So you control what photographs are shown to the jury?
No.
The ones that came from your house?
No.
Now, in addition, how many photographs would you say were at the house of the family over this period of time?
Which period?
After the killings, how many photographs did you see in your house in Beverly Hills?
Very few. My grandmother sort of took everything and took them back east to where she wanted to form albums and memorabilias and things like that.
Were there videotapes taken of you and your brother while you were growing up?
Yes.
And would you say that was pretty common?
Yeah, I would say it was pretty common. Mostly of tennis. In fact, almost all of tennis, but that was pretty common.
Now, you're out of these photographs that were at the house, that were accumulated over about 20 years. The defense has presented 2 photographs. One photograph that your brother said was of him in the bathtub, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And one of you with a blanket around you. Is that right? You had some kind of a bedspread or something on you?
How old was I?
Maybe you could tell me that.
Your Honor, I would, that mischaracterizes the photograph.
Objection sustained.
Do you remember a photograph shown of you?
You're referring to an exhibit here?
Yes.
Okay.
There was an exhibit.
Yeah, there were a few photographs up there of me.
And they came from a roll of film that was mostly of your birthday?
Oh, the one.
This is the bad photos that were taken of them as little boys, neck down, which I have not allowed visually on the channel. So, if anybody feels like they need to see those for completion of this, Court TV shows everything. I am not doing so. It's not worth it on my channel. I'm not directing anyone to go there. Ugh, God, ugh, I don't want to say that. But that is a part that I 100% feel comfortable with censoring because YouTube would 100% yeet my channel. So if those show up again, I'm going to, if they sound like they're about to show those photos again, I'm going to take the screen off until I've been able to verify whether or not they're showing them. So just so you guys know.
The ones on my 6th birthday? Yes, I remember those.
Now, did you ever take a picture of your brother? You ever use your parents' camera?
When they wanted me, I wasn't really supposed to use my parents' camera, but if there was a group and they wanted me to take a photo, I took a photo. I did that at church once. I remember doing it then and when we were playing tennis sometimes.
Did you ever get a picture taken of you by your brother when you were growing up?
Definitely not when I was naked.
You don't recall that?
No, that didn't happen. I would remember that.
When you would take a picture as a child, would it be a centered picture?
I didn't
photo?
I didn't take pictures as a child. When I was 12, 13, when we moved to New Jersey, then as I got older, my parents would allow me to use the camera.
And you've testified before, I believe, these juries that you believed your father had taken many, many pictures of you naked, correct?
No,
Is that right?
Objection sustained.
Did you testify that your father had taken other photos of you?
Objection, he didn't testify to that at all.
No, yeah, he didn't.
It's a question. Your answer.
My father did take many photographs of me naked.
But again, I don't know how much Kuriyama's actually been actively listening to the testimony, because he seems to be mixed up on that. Erik did not testify to that at all. That was Lyle who testified to that. Anyway.
And do you know whether he took photographs of your brother naked?
I have no idea.
Now, your father and mother didn't know that they were going to be killed by you and your brother on August 20th, 1989, did they?
Probably not. I would guess not.
So they didn't have time to go and hide any photographs of the family, did they, before you killed them?
Cause for speculation.
Overruled.
Also argumentative.
Overruled.
Is that right?
I don't think they were concerned about hiding photographs on August 20th. I think they had a lot of different things on their mind then.
Now, you said that you thought your mother could read minds, and you found out later that your mother taped your calls, correct?
I didn't know if she could read minds, but she seemed to have it seemed like magic. And I found out later she was taping my calls.
And in fact, didn't you tell Dr. Oziel that your mother locked her bedroom door, about a week before, because she sensed that you and your brother were going to kill them?
No, what I told Dr. Oziel is that everybody in the family locked the doors, and especially that last week. And when I said it, I didn't mean to say it. It slipped out.
It slipped out.
Yeah.
You didn't mean to tell him that your mother was locking her door?
I didn't mean to tell her that my mother, my brother, and I were locking our door, because I figured he would ask why as soon as I said it, but he never did.
And in fact, on September 17th, you told Detective Zoller that your mother was locking her door recently too, didn't you? That wasn't a common thing. That was something that she had just started to do recently.
No,
Isn't that right?
That was something that we were all doing recently, but had started as soon as we moved into the Beverly Hills house. Things changed. That we had never had a code on the house, and she fixed the code. She started locking every door in the house, and it just seemed. I thought something was going on. It seemed really eerie. I'm not sure what I told Detective Zoller on the 17th. If you have it.
Really quick, Tish had a question here. Can he ask questions about things if they didn't come up when Leslie questioned him? Yes. He can ask questions that are related to the defense as well. That because they're if it's to rebut things that he testified to, for example, things that are maybe not topics themselves that were covered in direct examination, but they rebut some of the things, or they contextualize certain things. Also, he's been in the courtroom this entire time listening to all the other testimony. So there's also a bit more expansion that he can ask about, even if it's stupid, in my opinion.
If you had mentioned that your mother was locking her doors and then later mentioned it also to Dr. Oziel, would that have been something noteworthy that had just occurred, or was that something that had been occurring all along since you had lived in Beverly Hills?
I can't answer your question because I don't know what I said to
We'll
Detective
go through
Zoller.
that. What kinds of videos would be taken of you and your brother?
Mostly videos, playing tennis or whatever sports we were doing.
Was there ever any videos where you were given parties by your parents, or at proms or dances, anything like that?
I don't remember any, but they very well could have.
And where would those be, with your grandmother?
At this point, I would have no idea.
The only moving picture that you've shown to the juries is, I believe, of you swimming like 15 years ago. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, we have a lot more.
Yeah. You have some of your mother and you and your brother, or maybe your mother's smiling.
I'm going to object to the formal testimony. I'm going to object to this whole area in fact and ask to approach.
Overall.
We have a lot of different videos that would show me playing tennis. We have different videos that would show, I guess, my mother smiling. We have a lot of different videos. My attorneys have told me about some of them.
Do you remember a defense witness testifying that over a period of 3 years, he had never seen your mother smile once? Do you remember that?
No, I said that that's the one thing I wanted from my mother, was for her to smile, and that's my favorite thing about her.
So you saw your mother smile.
On this issue,
On that issue the court's not aware of.
relating to this question?
I'll go on to a different area, Your Honor.
No, not related to the question.
Okay, well, if he's going on to something else with the
It has nothing to do with what's going on.
okay, sure you may.
Okay.
There was a matter that council wanted to deal with, and it'll take a little while to do that. So as I indicated, we were going to be recessing at 4 o'clock anyway. So I'll permit council the opportunity to use the 15 minutes to deal with that matter that they discussed. And we'll resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And
Boom.
both juries are.
All right. That's the end of the testimony for today. Okay, let me just check to see if I have saved any other questions, because sometimes I save them and then I totally forget about them. Let's see. Love Dreaming Peach. Sorry, I didn't answer this earlier. Wasn't the fact that the parents took / had these kind of pictures of the kids enough proof that they were abused? So the federal 1984 Child Protection Act, which prescribes these kind of photos as yes, but as Kuriyama is trying to point out here, he's trying to make a case that someone else could have taken those photos, because he's like, well, didn't you take photos with a camera at some point too? And so didn't other people in the family take photos with a camera? I suppose. Obviously, when he was like 4, 5, 6 years old, that wasn't the case. Usually, back when people actually used actual cameras and they weren't just connected to our phones, like I remember it was like not like a rite of passage, but kind of a rite of passage when you were old enough that your parents trusted you to handle the camera. So it's like 4, 5, 6 years old, way too young. All right. Okay. So that is about it. Well, your everyday sheep. Yeah, it's a good question. Even if someone else took the photos, why did Kitty keep them? Why didn't that cause a massive family emergency? Right? Like, I don't have kids, but if, I would like to have a family at some point. And if my hypothetical kids, I found photos like that, holy crap, I would have a very different reaction. And a lot of very serious discussions and probably massive life changes would be happening as a result. Ugh. So yeah, all kinds of questions and nonsense and whatnot. Okay. All right, guys, that for me about does it for this one. Thank you so much for joining me with episode 46 of this case of the Menendez Brothers trial from 1993. This has been another fascinating one. Thankfully, the testimony was not as heartbreaking as some of the other episodes that we've watched, particularly of Erik's testimony. But of course, we are in Lester Kuriyama's cross-examination of him. We're already seeing some interesting questions, to say the least. But this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all the folks that are in the chat or lurking or, commenting. Those of you on replay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, of course, to the mods for helping to make sure that this is a place that everyone can come and agree or disagree, bring their opinions, bring their different perspectives, and do so in a way so that everyone feels that they can actually voice their opinions, whether they agree or disagree with other people in the chat or elsewhere. All right, you guys, that for me about does it. Thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Those of you in the US, happy Thanksgiving on Thursday. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful time. Those of you in Bike Club, I am not planning on streaming this Friday because of the holiday weekend. If that changes, I will let you know. But at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to treat it as a true holiday weekend. So yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. See you in the next